The best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Hello, welcome, good evening. I hope you're doing well out there. This is Nick. I'm the creator of Hayes Reviews. We're back for another live stream reading. We're continuing with the Milner-Fabian Conspiracy by Ioan Ratiu. It's a 2012 publication. We are on part 8 of the video series tonight. We are about to begin chapter number 5, and there's 10 chapters in the book, so we're about halfway through or thereabouts, and it has been a rip-roaring, fantastic roller coaster of a ride so far. We've been learning all about socialism, all about the Fabian Society, all about the British Labour Party, and tonight we're going to be learning about Chatham House, the Royal Institute for International Affairs. If you don't know what that is, then please stick around, because for the next 2 to 3 hours, probably more like 3 hours, we tend to go long form on this show. We're going to be diving into some websites. We're going to be looking at some contextual information, but more importantly, and most significantly, we're going to be continuing reading direct from the book, which is what we do on this channel. We read and we read and we read some more so that we can try to get a handle on what's going on in the world, try and get a grip on things. The subtitle of the show is Truth in Books, because I think that is where the truth is not hidden, but where it is carefully placed out of sight and out of mind of most people. As well as being not a very sexy way to spend time these days, a lot of us have been sort of conditioned to not read and to not turn to books, not to collect them, not to value them and treasure them as important artifacts. It's been sort of bred out of us, and instead we're trained and coached, guided, hypnotized by screens, and we spend a lot more time looking at digital media and looking at pixels instead of pages. And I think that's a huge problem, and I would like to do something about that. And so what I advocate for on this show is stretching of the attention span and focusing on some long form content. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. You're not going to see any CGI monsters being slain or interstellar spacecraft traveling through wormholes. None of that exciting stuff. It's a little more slow paced. It's a little more slowed down. But, you know, like what does the saying go about nature? Nature never hurries, but in the end, everything is accomplished. Okay, so it's good to slow down. In fact, I'm going to speak a little slower. I came out of the gate pretty quick there with a high rate and a high pace of speaking. So let's slow it down a little bit. Let's calm it down. Let's take a deep breath. It's always good to take a deep breath. I've had a pretty good day. I've been doing all my Christmas shopping. I like to get it all done in one day because I like to spend as little time shopping as possible. And my wife and I managed to get everything we needed except for one person's gift. So we're well on track. Then we came back and we ate some delicious home-cooked Thai food, because we went to a Thai restaurant last night and it was so disappointing and it was so terrible that we thought we would cook it ourselves. That we realized we could do better at home. And so we made the dish ourselves tonight, and it turned out wonderfully indeed. It was very nice. For any of you Thai food aficionados out there, we had pad kapao, which is a kind of spicy mince meat dish with basil and a lot of chili in a sort of sweet sauce, drizzled over rice. And that was absolutely delicious with a fried egg on top for good measure, because you can't beat a fried egg, can you? There's not many things in this world that are better than a fried egg. Apart from a 3-hour live stream of me reading books. Obviously, that's even better than a fried egg. But if you have a fried egg and you get to eat that while you're listening to the stream tonight, 10 out of 10 to you, you are definitely winning. So how are you all doing out there? I see we've got a few people on the YouTube chat. We got Frank and Melissa and LJ and Gwen and Adam all saying hello. I hope you're all doing well out there. Thank you for joining the live stream. And if you are tuning in on the replay, I usually say this at the beginning, but I forgot tonight. But if you are tuning in on the replay at some point in the future, please don't forget that there is a pinned comment below the video with timestamps, and you can jump ahead to the relevant part of the video if you are looking for less introduction and more meat, because I will add those timestamps for your convenience. So please bear that in mind if you're watching on the replay. And I hope things are going well in the future. I hope we all haven't been, vaporized by alien weapons, or had our countries invaded by drones, or been blown up in nuclear Armageddon. So hopefully none of that stuff's happened, and we're all still ticking along nicely. Hopefully the electricity is still working, and the sun is still coming up in the morning, and the internet still works, importantly, so that you can catch this replay. On the YouTube channel, on the Rumble channel, and on Odyssey, which is the 3 places that we're broadcasting, you can check the playlist tab. And on that tab, you can see previous books that we've read on the channel. I will tell you that there's more of those on YouTube, because in the past I used to stream exclusively to YouTube. Now that I've got Rumble and Odyssey also set up, I'm uploading things to there gradually. But all 10 books that we've done are on YouTube. And then the other 2 places, Rumble and Odyssey, I think they have 4 books. I think this is the 4th one. So bear that in mind as well if you want to go back and catch up. We've done 10 books, and at this point, things are really starting to knit together. We're starting to find common threads and themes and ways that these books interlink. And this one in particular is tying together not only the books that we've read in their entirety on the channel, but also books that I've reviewed. Yes, I did start this channel as a book review channel, and I would read the book and make notes, and then I would do an hour just talking about what I'd read, reading some of the quotes. And most of the time I was just shocked and amazed about aspects of history that I'd never heard or never learned about. Not that I was ever into history, and I was never sort of excited or turned on by that sort of by the history lessons at school. Never interested me until we all got locked down back in 2020, and all those shenanigans started. And then I went looking for answers. Then I went looking for the events, the key players and the movers and the shakers that led up to that event. And one of the first things I heard about that really piqued my curiosity was Event 201, which happened right before lockdowns were announced. If you haven't heard about that, check that out. And then when you find out what that is and you look at the people involved in that, you just start going back and back and back and back. And eventually you end up learning about Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner and the Round Table Group, and Cecil Rhodes's last will and testament, his bequeathing of vast sums of money to the formation of a secret society, and his will being having Lord Rothschild named as the executor. And then part of that will also went on to form the Rhodes Scholarship Program, by which students were funded to come over to the UK to study at Oxford. And then many of those students went on to hold positions of political power and influence. And then you can just fill in the gaps between those 2 points, right? And that's kind of what we're doing on the channel. That's why I started this channel. Why I started collecting the books was because I thought, I have no idea really about the history of the last 100 years. I know a few things, like apparently some people played golf in a desert, and there was, some guy with a small mustache, big fan of Charlie Chaplin. He got up to some mischief as well, and various events and things that happened, but they were very distant to me. I was a young man and I was playing guitar, and I then became a teacher and went to live on the other side of the planet. I wasn't that interested in how we got here. But like I said, once we got locked down and I didn't have much to do other than learn, then I started asking questions, and then I started collecting books. And now here we are reading those books. So when I began reviewing the books, I was reviewing things such as Lord Milner's Second War. I reviewed a book called Hidden History by Jerry Doherty and Jim McGregor, which is a fantastic book. Highly recommend it. It's available on Amazon. It's 20 quid, but we should read that on the channel at some point. I intend to do that. That book blew my mind. And so those books, those two in particular, as well as IBM and the Holocaust, they're tying in with the live book readings we're doing now, which consists of things like The Fabian Freeway by Rose Martin, and then now we're doing the Milner-Fabian Conspiracy by Ioan Ratiu. So that's my introduction, little preamble. That's actually a pre-preamble ramble, because I do have a preamble ramble prepared for you tonight. So now that we're done with the pre-preamble ramble, let's get into the actual preamble ramble. Okay, let's go over here. So the topic of tonight's chapter is going to be Chatham House or the Royal Institute for International Affairs. That's two titles for the same thing. Chatham House is the location. The Royal Institute for International Affairs is the name of the group who meet and get together. And this group have been pretty influential. They're described in detail by Carroll Quigley in his books, Tragedy and Hope and the Anglo-American Establishment. Royal Institute for International Affairs is mentioned very often by Alan Watt of cuttingthroughthematrix.com in the many hundreds of blurbs that he's done, educational lectures, linking together ideas, giving you that big picture, that sort of 10,000 view of history and what's going on and how long it's been happening and how this situation is perpetuated and continues to unfold. So the name of the group I've heard of before. And you might have heard of Chatham House as well. And specifically, you might have heard of what's called the Chatham House Rule, which we'll get onto in a minute. But I thought in preparation for today's chapter, before we get into that, let's have a look at Chatham House. And instead of looking at Wikipedia, I thought we would just go straight to their own website and see what they've got to say about themselves in their own words, because it's all well and good going to read the book and see what Ioan Ratiu has to say about them, but let's give them a chance to explain themselves in their own words, right? So I thought, let's have a look at their website first. And so here we are. This is their website. It's Chatham House, and they've got this little logo up here, which is kind of a globe with some faces on it, and they look like they're about to have a little three-way smooch. They look like they're going to kiss each other. It's a strange position. I don't know why three people would end up in a position like this. It's kind of weird. But anyway, that's what they chose, and that's what they've gone with. And they do have a page on the website. If you go to About Us, you can go and read about their history. And they tell us that they are, or that Chatham House has been, a source of independent analysis, trusted dialogue, and influential ideas for 100 years. So, as I was just saying, when Event 201 happened and we got locked down and I started making connections and learning the history of the last 100 years, it's pretty interesting that this group has been around 100 years as well, isn't it? Yes, it is very much indeed. So they tell us that they have pioneered the unique and disruptive concept of an organization dedicated to the study of international affairs. So I don't know what's so unique about it. Like, no one in the world's ever thought about studying, the way countries or civilizations interact with each other. But apparently they think they're the first ones to have come up with that. And they call themselves disruptive. And disruptive could possibly connote destruction, changing things up, mixing things up, causing havoc, causing chaos. If you like the way things are, then you're probably not going to like Chatham House and what they've got to offer, because they are here to disrupt. Disrupt's one of those words that kind of gets used a lot in corporations. We got to disrupt the marketplace and we have to disrupt the way we're doing things. And it's an interesting choice of term to use to describe themselves, right? They tell us that their vision altered the course of international politics. So over the last 100 years, they have been influencing things and changing things and altering the course of things. And they've also helped create the international consensus. Helped create the international consensus that followed the world wars. So right there in the first paragraph, they're telling you about their interest in internationalism. They want to get people on the same page and establish that that consensus, that way of viewing the world, that idea of the way things are. Let's make it international and make sure everybody agrees, okay? It also says that they have been driving world-changing policies, and that's their history. So, what about their history? Well, it started in 1919 on the sidelines of the Paris Peace Conference. It tells us that the British diplomat Lionel Curtis advocates the creation of an institute for the study of international affairs. His vision is to foster mutual understanding between nations and for the institute to propose solutions to the biggest challenges facing the world. It doesn't say anything here about Lionel Curtis's 1,000-page book that he wrote called Civitas Dei, or The Commonwealth of God, which is here, which you can't read because my light's shining on it. It says there, The Commonwealth of God. This is his 1,000-page book, his 1,000-page argument, arguing for world government. And I just noticed today, I hadn't noticed this before, but if you go here, there's a sort of engraving on the front of this. I'll put the light on, make it easier to see the detail on that. It's kind of a crown. It's got some downward pointing stars in there. It'd be good to get a pencil of a piece of paper and a pencil and look at that in a little more detail. But that's Lionel Curtis. He has a massive book advocating world government. I haven't read the book, but if you go on Wikipedia, it will tell you there that the book, that he was an advocate for world government, but it doesn't mention that here. But there's Lionel Curtis with his buddies, I think, at the 1919 Paris Peace Conference. So what else? 1920, they had their first meeting. 1922, Arnold Toynbee, the historian and writer, he became the director of studies. He establishes the annual survey of international affairs and was hailed as a pioneer in method and model for scholarship. Arnold Toynbee is mentioned very frequently in Carol Quigley's books as well. Then they launched a Journal of International Affairs, which included the contributions of Alfred Zimmer, an historian and scholar on international fiscal policy. Then in 1926, they got their royal charter from King George V, who said, "You have your royal charter, which underpins the independence, impartiality, and global outlook of the organization." So apparently getting endorsed by a king means that you are impartial and not in any way representing the interests of the ruling class. 1927 came the Chatham House Rule, which you may have heard of. The rule is formally adopted, encouraging a trusted environment designed to understand and resolve complex problems. What is the Chatham House Rule? Well, it's right here on the screen. When a meeting or part thereof is held under the Chatham House Rule, participants are free to use the information received, but neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speakers nor that of any other participant may be revealed. So you're not allowed to know who said what. They'll tell you what they talked about. They'll tell you the decisions that they came to. They'll tell you their policy recommendations, but they will not tell you who they came from. So it's kind of the development of this, you know, like magazines such as The Economist, they don't tell you who's writing. They say we, like we at The Economist, but actually there's no one person that you can pin the quote to, right? And it's quite a clever way of hiding behind the collective. And so there's never an individual who's culpable or who's responsible for a thing that is said, right? It's quite sneaky, actually, when you think about it. And you can see this actually happen. I was out today and I saw a sign and it said, "Treat our staff with respect. We do not tolerate mistreatment of our staff." And I thought, oh, that's all very well and good, but who is we? Surely we is the staff, right? But what I realized was that if you had a problem or an issue with the service or the product and you wanted to speak to somebody about it and you were getting irate or you were starting to get emotional, you're not allowed to direct it at the person who represents the business or the company, right? You have to write a letter or an email and send it off and hope that somebody takes it seriously and gets back in touch with you and addresses your grievance. Like, gone are the days of airing things and having a face-to-face and having any sort of I don't want to use the word conflict, but any sort of emotional exchange which isn't totally dampened and polite and soft and gentle and calm and reasonable, right? So you're not really allowed to get emotive now in public. It's frowned upon and it's discouraged. And this kind of reminded me of that. There's a sort of I suppose it's part of their establishing of this international consensus that they talk about further up, right? We're speaking on behalf of the consensus, and you cannot criticize the consensus, if you see what I mean. Yeah, Gwen just says, I see that sign everywhere now. Right, so it's like as people are getting more wound up and fed up and frustrated as their money is sort of devalued, prices are going up, economic situations are getting worse for many, many people, stress levels rising, all the different things that are going on. You're not allowed to express any of that. You have to hold it and bottle it and smile and be polite and friendly and kind. And then, because if you do lose your rag, then you're going to be in the wrong automatically, regardless of what's happened to you or how valid your complaint or your issue may be. So this just reminded me of that, just having this kind of hiding the individuals, hiding the names of the people who say things, and just sort of just giving you the information and making the announcements devoid and divorced from any specific person. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. But anyway, let's continue with the history. In the 1930s, the concept for an organization for the study of international affairs rapidly catches on. Over time, institute staff help found and influence institutes in Australia, Canada, East Africa, Japan, Nigeria, South Africa, and elsewhere. World leaders are drawn to Chatham House. So this is showing you, this is by the 1930s, right? This is before the Second World War. The tendrils are already spreading. They're influencing other countries. They're having similar groups establish themselves in other countries with similar sorts of rules and similar sort of function. And then Mahatma Gandhi shows up and he gives us the very wise and profound and sage advice that the best way to sort things out is to sit down and talk about them. That's literally what this quote here says. World-shaking stuff. Yeah, if you disagree with someone, sit down with them and talk things out with sincerity. Thanks, Gandhi, for that pearly wisdom. So carrying on, 1930, there's the period between two wars, and then there is the shaping of the economic order. And John Maynard Keynes shows up, and he considers the role of gold in the international monetary system in Chatham House study groups. So it's around this time that Britain comes off the gold standard, and we go onto the funny money standard, where the money isn't backed by anything, and you can print as much of it as you like and loan it out at interest, and you have fractional reserve banking and all this kind of, I don't know if you do have that at this point, but it's the beginning of what leads to that, where nobody really has anything of value. Everybody's in debt to everybody else, and the whole world's in debt, and there's not enough money on the face of the planet to ever pay all this debt off, which is this system of kicking the can down the road, which has to eventually end up in some sort of catastrophic collapse of the financial system, which almost happened in 2008, but we'll learn a little bit more about that later in the preamble ramble. 1913, Nobel Peace Prize, Sir Norman Angell, council member of Chatham House, received the prize for his 1910 book, The Great Illusion, which I do have a copy of somewhere else. I just picked it up once in an Oxfam for a few quid. I didn't know what it was about, and I didn't know any of the stuff that we're learning about on the channel when I bought it, but I just liked the look of it, and I thought, oh, probably worth having, The Great Illusion, because it seemed to be a book about well, it says here, the book analyzes economic interdependence and the futility of conquest. So I bought it because I was like, wow, it was published in 1910, and it's explaining how war is pointless and it's just going to cause problems, and it's no way to move forward with a civilization. And yet, despite that book being published and despite the Nobel Peace Prize being awarded to its author, we still went on to have, 2 world wars. As it tells us here, in 1939, the outbreak of war, a committee on reconstruction begins work on post-war welfare, medical relief in Europe, air transport, and future international organizations. So the war breaks out, and before it's even concluded, before they even know what's going to happen with the war, Chatham House boys and girls, I think, get together and start talking about future international organizations. Already planning ahead, already continuing the work of Mr. Lionel Curtis in his book, The Commonwealth of God. Could it be that they have been all along working towards a system of world government? Continuing, we've got the 1940s, and this is Chatham House's influence in conflict. It says, Chatham House researchers generate unique insight throughout World War II with the creation of the Foreign Research and Press Service. So they're getting involved in publications and influencing the way people think through producing their own materials, their books, leaflets, pamphlets, these kinds of things. And then it says that many staff relocate to Balliol College, Oxford. Ah, what a surprise to see the good old boys of Balliol College, Oxford showing up again. There's a lot of people who end up passing through this particular college in Oxford. So then we've got 1944, a new international order, which is where the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development is established. Then we have the New Middle East in 1945, where David Ben-Gurion, who's the first Prime Minister of Israel, he speaks at Chatham House. 1946, there's some post-war institutions. Then we get into the 1950s, where there's new tensions between the Soviet Union and the West. And then in 1951, we have the New Europe. It tells us that Konrad Adenauer, who was the Chancellor of West Germany, he speaks to Chatham House. He states that peace had, again and again, been wrecked on the rocks of nationalism. There it is again, that old boogeyman nationalism, getting blamed at every turn for these nasty wars that we keep having. It's not the bankers, it's not the people who own the arms industry, it's not the people with their investments in the stocks of the arms industries. No. It's the people who are proud of their country and where they're from. They're the people who are the problem. He says, in 1951, he says, the only way to preserve peace in Europe would be an international community transcending national frontiers. How about that? Shocker. 1953 is the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. She becomes a patron of Chatham House, and she receives briefings from Chatham House staff on major events. And she also meets Nelson Mandela. Then in 1958, the Institute of Race Relations is created from Chatham House's work promoting racial justice in the UK and internationally. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about the Institute of Race Relations, but good to know that it was founded by Chatham House people. All right, continuing, we've got in 1964, Che Guevara publishes an article in International Affairs on the economic transformation of Cuba under Fidel Castro. He writes that American imperialism is a giant with feet of clay, and it's weaker than it seems. And then in 1969, there's the Arab-Israeli conflict. King Hussein of Jordan addresses the Institute, saying Israel can have peace or territory, but not both. He expresses the hope that a solution can be found through the United Nations. So that was very wishful thinking back in 1969, and that particular hope obviously did not come to fruition. Then in the 1970s, we have the Chatham House version. And I'm not sure if this is a book or an article, but it says, in the Chatham House version and other Middle Eastern studies, Eli Kaduri criticizes what he perceives as the Institute's pro-Arab stance. So interesting that whoever this Eli Kaduri is criticizing Chatham House for having a pro-Arab stance. It's quite, that links to Ioan Ratiu's thesis in this book about Islamization and this sort of deliberate importation of Islamic peoples to countries that previously were non-Islamic for the most part, right? And also this person, Eli Kaduri, attacks Arnold Toynbee for denying Yes, that is a typo. I found a typo. I think it's supposed to be denying the civilizing role played by the British Empire. So actually, I kind of like this. I like the sound of this guy, and I want to know if this is a book or something. I need to look it up. I haven't checked yet. But that sounds like something worth reading. So it sounds like they're bringing a little bit of balance and giving Arnold Toynbee, who is a authorized historian, writes a lot of the books from the point of view of the ruling elite, or at least he writes the books that are given to the public, the version of history that is put forward to the public, I think, rather than the version of history that is true, let's say. So that was something worth mentioning and being aware of and keeping an eye out. Eli Kaduri is the guy's name, and the book or the article is the Chatham House Version and Other Middle Eastern Studies. So continuing on, the 1980s is when they start sounding the alarm on climate. Chatham House inaugurates an annual climate change conference to promote international cooperation on this critical global challenge. So what does that remind us of? That reminds us of this book, First Global Revolution, and that very important phrase near the back somewhere. Oh, can you believe I haven't marked it up? What am I doing? But basically, it's the quote in here that says, in searching for an enemy of man, we came up with the idea that climate change and the associated problems would fit the bill. I don't know what page it's on. I should have been more prepared. But it's in this book somewhere. And I've talked about it elsewhere on the channel. But same idea, same sort of people. International cooperation is going to be needed because we've got to save the climate change from those nasty, dirty, horrible little humans. We got to fix this critical global challenge. So in the 1980s, they start pivoting towards the climate change narrative. Then in 86, there's the Chernobyl disaster. So they bring in these the fear around nuclear power. 1988 is the breakup of the Soviet Union, and they get Thatcher, Reagan, and Gorbachev all speaking at events organized by Chatham House. That is pretty much... Oh, yeah, and then 1996 here, on this side, sorry, it says HRH, the Prince of Wales. So this is the Institute's Britain in the World Conference. The Prince, or I should say the King, formerly known as Prince, highlights the looming challenges of environmental degradation, pandemics, drugs, terrorism, globalization, and free trade. That was back in 1996. The Prince of Wales is warning people about environmental degradation and pandemics. It's quite interesting. Then in 2001, there's a United States discussion group off the back of the events of the 11/9 event. I'm going to start calling it the 11/9 event from now on because that's the way around that the date should be. It's actually, you do the day and then the month and then the year, because then you're going from small to larger to largest, right? It doesn't make any sense to do the month, then the day, then the year. That's just ridiculous. So I'm just going to call it the 11/9 event from now on. Hopefully that'll confuse the algorithms and won't trip off the sensors, the AI sensors. But the 11/9 event leads to the formation of the United States Discussion Group. And I thought this quote was quite interesting. It says, "The forum allows for a more open and nuanced discussion of the issues than is perhaps possible in the US." So what's the suggestion? The suggestion is that the US doesn't have freedom of speech. This is 2001. This is hinting at and suggesting that we can't have an open and nuanced conversation in America. We have to go outside of America in order to have that open and honest and nuanced conversation. So I thought that was quite telling. Curious as well to see such an admission, on this website. Then in 2005, they launched the Chatham House Prize, which I hadn't heard of. And Viktor Yushchenko of Ukraine is the first person to win that, and he receives it from Her Majesty the Queen. And this award is annual, and it goes on, and it still goes on to this present day, as we'll see in a moment. And it's given to an individual or organization that makes a significant contribution to the improvement of international relations. Then in 2005, we have the Iraq War, and the Institute's research paper, Security Terrorism in the UK, links the growing threat of terrorism in the UK with the invasion of Iraq. Shock horror. And it's widely cited, and it provokes strong criticism from the UK government. So it might seem like, because they're criticizing the UK government, you might think, oh, well, they're obviously impartial and well-meaning and good people because they're criticizing their own government. Well, don't forget, these are internationalists. They want to get rid of sovereignty. They want to get rid of the government, right? So it's certainly not revealing to us. It's not the fact that they're willing to piss off and upset the UK government doesn't mean that they're good guys and that they're on our side, right? They just don't like the UK government because they want an even bigger one run by them that controls everybody everywhere. So the whole point is to make the local governments, the national governments, look incompetent, look bloated, look inefficient, look full of greedy people who are more interested in themselves than the citizens of the countries. And if you can push that, create that perception in people, then people are going to be clamoring for and asking for some sort of supranational organization like the UN to swoop in and start taking over, you know? So you can kind of see it taking shape that way. So it's not surprising. But remember, in the last stream, we talked about Mark Curtis's book, Secret Affairs, which is, he was a Royal Institute for International Affairs research fellow, talking about how Britain, the establishment in Britain, colluded with radical Islam and funded and helped train and helped grow these Islamic extremists who went on to commit terrorist attacks. Part of history and part of that whole movement, which often gets neglected and not talked about. And then in the 2010s, so moving on with the history, we've got the Asian century. So I don't know why this is the Asian century, okay? But apparently they've dubbed the 2010s and beyond the Asian century. And this is some analysis from Chatham House influences China's establishment of low-carbon economic zones, ensuring integrated international action on sustainable development between China and the EU. Now, I've heard that China is not doing that well at all on their sustainable development, building more coal power plants and using up lots more resources and not really giving two shakes of a lamb's tail. I don't know. I'm trying not to swear. They're not really caring so much about these commitments to saving the environment that the rest of the Western world is getting beaten over the head with, right? But apparently Chatham House is doing good work, and they're influencing China to care about that sort of thing. And then the Institute in the 2010s launches a new research center to explore a sustainable, thriving resource economy for citizens and the environment. So isn't that exciting? Won't you love to live in one of the Chatham House's 15-minute cities? Then here we've got the Arab uprisings. In 2015, they do some work on forest governance. Then we have 2016 Brexit. 2017 is recognition for diversity, where Chatham House is included in the definitive list of UK-based organisations committed to promoting diversity among staff in age, disability, gender, LGBTQ+, and race. 2017, they have something called the Tribes of Europe, which is an award-winning website. So I haven't looked at that. Might be worth checking out. And then all the way up to 2018, which sees the Institute's Digital Society Initiative and its Commission on Democracy and Technology in Europe, exploring how technology can be harnessed to drive solutions to complex policy changes. There's that corporate language again. We're going to drive solutions and we're going to deliver outcomes. 2019 is all about plastics pollution, and they give the Chatham House Prize to David Attenborough. And David Attenborough comes out with this humdinger of a quote: "International problems have never been more international," which is like, what does that even mean? If it's international or it's not, right? I don't know how you make something more international or less international. It doesn't, but I don't know. I'd have to ask David. He is getting on a bit, so let's forgive him for his kind of clumsy phrasing there. I'm not quite sure the point he's getting at. But he's saying it's worse today, and we need more centralization of power. We need more accountability. We need to make sure that people in rich countries get poorer and people in poor countries stay poor. And that's how we make sure it's fair for everybody. And then that brings us to 2020, which is the centenary year. And this is where Chatham House celebrates 100 years of existence. And they celebrate a century of excellence and independent thinking. So that is that's the history of Chatham House in a nutshell. And I thought it'd be worth going over that before we read the book and we find out what Ioan Ratiu has to teach us about the history. But I did do a little more digging on the website, so we'll have a look at those pages. Now, what else are the good people at Chatham House involved in? Well, back in 2021, they had a short list for the Chatham House Prize, and that included the Oxford Vaccine Group, and it also included Angela Merkel and the Ecuadorian environmentalist Nemonte Nenquimo. So it's all about injecting people with experimental concoctions. It's all about opening the doors to massive amounts of immigration and saving the environment. That's their three main concerns in a nutshell, I would say. It tells us down here, because it was actually tricky to just find a full list of everyone who's won the prize. The Chatham House Prize is not mentioned on Wikipedia. But here I found a partial list, and it says previous recipients include Sir David Attenborough, the Committee to Protect Journalists, Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos, President of Ghana John Kufuor, Médecins Sans Frontières, and Melinda Gates, of course, of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So that's the kind of people who are doing the best work for international relations. In 2018, there's a bit here about the Committee to Protect Journalists. They won the Chatham House Prize, and this bit in the article made me laugh because it says, a free press provides an essential check and balance on government by scrutinizing policymaking and public administration and helping to promote honesty, accountability, and transparency in the exercise of executive, legislative, and judicial power. Well, it would, wouldn't it, if it existed? If there was a free press anywhere on the face of the earth, then maybe it would do that. But more likely than not, it would get banned and shut down and have its knees cut off before it could get up and running. So, yeah, it's just funny that they're at least that first sentence I agree with wholeheartedly. I don't know the rest of it. Who did they give this to? They gave it to the Committee to Protect Journalists. That was back in 2018. I don't think the state of journalism has improved much since then. In fact, I think it's got a lot worse. But, despite this prize being awarded. Then this year, 2024, Donald Tusk was awarded the Chatham House Prize. And Bronwen Maddox, who's the director of Chatham House, said, Donald Tusk has played an extraordinary role championing the democratic values of the European Union. Not of his country, not serving the people in his nation, not benefiting the people who supposedly vote for him and put him in power in the first place. Nope, he's serving the European Union, and that's why we're going to give him an award. So they're really overt, proud internationalists, kind of like David Rockefeller said in his memoirs. I'm sure they would stand guilty and proud of it if they were accused of being internationalists. I don't think they'd have a problem with that label. Okay, we've got in 2023, guess who won the Chatham House Prize? You guessed it, it was President Zelensky. And I didn't know he had two Y's at the end of his name. I thought that was a typo at first. But they've actually done that all the way through. So there you go, Zelensky. Two Y's at the end of that name. If you knew that already, I apologize. It stood out to me. But it says here that in 2023, Zelensky was chosen by members of Chatham House for his leadership in the face of the reinvasion of his nation by Russia and comes at a crucial juncture in the war. Yes. I'm sure this nomination for the prize and the awarding of this prize really helped him in that crucial juncture in the war. But I like the way here it acknowledges that he's a former actor. I mean, I think they left this word in by mistake. That's not supposed to be there. It should just say the actor has unified his nation in defiance of a formidable foe. But we saw that typo on the other page. We got to forgive him for leaving an unnecessary word in. These things happen. It's hard to maintain a website and make sure it's accurate, isn't it? So Zelensky got it in 2023. 2019, it was given to Sir David Attenborough, as we already covered, for his episode of Blue Planet 2, which talked all about the plastic in the ocean. And the Queen showed up for that one and gave him the award. And then there was some centenary award winners as well. So after 100 years of the Chatham House existing, they gave some honorary awards to three people who were Greta Thunberg. She got the Centenary Changemakers Award because of her vanguard role in mobilizing. By mobilizing, she means like emotionally manipulating and brainwashing young people to take up climate activism. Sir David Attenborough got it again. Well, got another award. This time it was a lifetime award for his role in making really good nature documentaries. Sir David Attenborough has basically just been on holiday for the last 50 years, flying around to all the nicest places in the world. And he gets a knighthood and he gets awards thrown at him left, right, and center. What a life. And then Melina Abdullah, who was one of the co-founders of the Los Angeles chapter of Black Lives Matter, also got an award, the Diversity Champion Award. So how about that? Climate, nature worship, and non-white people. So that's basically it. What Chatham House is interested in. The three pillars of the international consensus. Then interestingly, there's this article here from November 2017, which is a Chatham House primer, The Internet of Things. So Chatham House have been telling you about the Internet of Things since 2017. It's like, how many years? 7 years ago. And there's a whole hour-long presentation here and the write-up at the bottom says, the phrase Internet of Things has become synonymous with the next stage of humankind's economic advancement. So it's about economics. And the talk I haven't watched the video, but it's there on their website. You can find it. It tells you about smart objects, the Internet of Things, and then it tells you how the Internet of Things will change the future. So basically, the plan of what we're going to do when we link everything together using internet, smart grid, 6G technology. And that's going to result in the reimagining of human needs. So what a creepy phrase, reimagining human needs. Like, humans are humans. The needs are needs, right? Water, food, companionship, warmth, a bit of time to relax and play, something meaningful to do or to build, community. Like, the human needs are going to be the human needs as long as humans are humans. Why would we have to reimagine human needs unless humans are not going to be humans anymore? And that leads us to the third point in this talk, which is, will humans become things in the Internet of Things? So, and then the other part between that is my fridge spying on me and should I care? So the truth is out there, ladies and gentlemen. The writing is on the wall. These plans are announced, they're visible, but you just don't have on your 6 o'clock broadcast on the BBC News, beep, beep, Chatham House have just released an hour-long forecast of what the Internet of Things is going to do to you and your loved ones in the future, right? They don't tell you that this stuff is out there. You have to go and find it. You have to be curious. You have to be interested in where power really lies and what these bland-sounding organizations are really doing. But I thought that was a curious resource on their website, and it'd be worth watching that video at some point. I haven't watched it yet. I just thought I would let you know that it's there. And then as I was going through Chatham House website, I also found this headline, which is Mark Carney appointed president of Chatham House. And this is from the 22nd of March. So what's that, 10 months ago? This year, 22nd of March 2024, Mark Carney, and I've recognized the name Mark Carney. I thought, I know that name. I've heard somebody at some point talking about that person somewhere online. So I thought I'll click on that and read a bit more. And this was where it got pretty interesting. So who is Mark Carney? Well, Mark Carney is a former governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. All right. It says here on the website as well that presidents of Chatham House underpin the Institute's independent, non-partisan voice on international affairs, confirming the connection between the Institute and policymakers through their experience at the highest levels of government and diplomacy. So that's what it's all about. These people are hired because of their excellence, their ability to not be swayed or influenced by money or power or politics. And they have a totally independent voice, meaning they don't represent anybody. They just represent the truth. And all they care about is the truth. Being honest. Doing good business practices. Okay. If you can believe that, then I have a bridge to sell you. But I thought, okay, now is a good point to actually jump over and do a bit of Wikipedia detective work. So I did. I went to have a look at Mark Carney. So who the hell is this guy? I mean, I knew his name, but he was the governor of the Bank of England, right, for 7 years, which was really surprising because he's Canadian. I was like, why do we have a Canadian governor for the Bank of England? What's going on? But he was also the 8th governor of the Bank of Canada for 5 years as well before that. He is also the chair and head of impact investing at Brookfield Asset Management, and he was named chairman of Bloomberg Incorporated. He was the chair of the Financial Stability Board from 2011 to 2018. Carney worked at Goldman Sachs as well as the Department of Finance Canada, and he also serves as the UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. So quite a career, I think you will agree. And let's see, he was born in 1965, so he has been around a while, and obviously been working his bottom off to get all these amazing roles, and all these very influential financial institutions, right? So his early life and education, kind of boring, but he was trained at Harvard, and then he started his career at Goldman Sachs, and spent 13 years there. Flying all over the world, Boston, London, New York City, Tokyo, and Toronto. He worked at the Department of Finance in Canada, and then he was governor of the Bank of Canada. Then it gets interesting. There's a section here, International Organization Memberships. On November the 4th, 2011, Carney was named chairman of the Basel-based Financial Stability Board. So Basel, that's interesting. There's a very important financial institution based there, isn't there? In a statement, Carney credited his appointment to, quote, the strong reputation of Canada's financial system and the leading role that Canada has played in helping to develop many of the most important international reforms. Why is the bank of one country responsible for developing international reforms, you know? Unless we're living in an international system, unless the system is already here and they just haven't announced it yet. These days, I'm feeling more and more that is actually the case. We're already living in a one world government type system. They just haven't sat out to say it and tell us yet, you know. It says that he had a 3-year term and a part-time commitment. And while he was there had been no indication of his priorities as chairman. Then, on the day of his appointment, the board published a list of 29 banks that were considered sufficiently large as to pose a risk to the global economy should they fail. In other words, too big to fail. In other words, we cannot let them fail no matter what they do, no matter how irresponsible they are, no matter what problems they cause. They are too big to fail and must be saved at all costs. So quite a coincidence that that happened on the day that he was appointed. This announcement was made. Carney then served as chairman of the Bank for International Settlements Committee on the Global Financial System from July 2010 until January 2012. Carney is a member of the Group of 30, an international body of leading financiers and academics, and of the foundation board of the World Economic Forum. Carney attended the annual meetings of the Bilderberg Group in 2011, 2012, and 2019. So well and truly connected. The Group of 30 reminded me of the book, The Committee of 300. So I thought I'd have a look and see what they're all about. And then it tells here that it's the G30, which I was more familiar with this title, the G30. But as it said on that previous page, it's a group of financiers and academics. And then in the history, the first sentence tells us all we need to know, which is that the Group of 30 was founded in 1978 by Jeffrey Bell at the initiative of the Rockefeller Foundation, which also provided initial funding for the body. The G30's current chairman is Mark Carney. So Mark Carney is the chairman of the G30. He's also the the president of Chatham House, as well as a Bilderberg Group attendee, and on the board of the World Economic Forum as well to boot. So, continuing with his career, the governor of the Bank of England. He succeeded Sir Mervyn King on July the 1st, 2013. He was the first non-Briton to be appointed to the role since the Bank of England was established in 1694. So that's pretty wild that this guy is the first one to break that pattern. The first one in how long is that? That's like 300 years. And then what happens? The Bank of England was given additional powers. So apparently all they needed to do to gain their superpowers was to put a Canadian in the role of leader of the Bank of England. And that's what they needed to do to unlock their superpowers. Kind of like Spider-Man being bitten by the radioactive spider. The Bank of England just needed to get bitten by a Canadian, and then that unlocked their additional powers, such as the ability to set bank capital requirements. How thrilling. But again, another coincidental date, isn't it? 2013, he gets in, and then from 2013, the Bank of England gets a lot of new powers. Just like here, he gets appointed as chairman, and on the same day, a list of 29 banks that are too big to fail gets published. I'm sure it's just coincidence. Continuing, it says, he was thought to have been offered a total pay package of about £624,000 a year, which was £100,000 a year more than the guy who did the job before him. So he must be very good at his job to get such a significant and ridiculous pay rise. But what's he been doing since 2020? Well, he was appointed as United Nations Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. Climate action and finance, because those two things go hand in hand in this day and age, right? It's all about tokenization of all the world's resources, all the living creatures, all the animals, the air, the liquid, and nature itself, tokenizing it all and trading it on the stock market. If that sounds wild and crazy to you, it should, but Whitney Webb has done excellent work explaining how that all works. In January 2020, Boris Johnson appointed Carney to the position of finance advisor for the UK presidency of the COP26 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. He is also vice chairman at Brookfield Asset Management, where he leads the firm's environmental, social, and governance, which is ESG, an impact fund investment strategy. So impact investing, this is all about you have to put your money that's where it's going to have the best impact on people's lives and the environment, which generally means like building wind turbines and solar panels all over the countryside. And then in February 2021, Carney retracted an earlier claim that the $600 billion Brookfield Asset Management portfolio was carbon neutral. So he's going around saying, yes, our $600 billion portfolio, yes, of course it's carbon neutral. He was caught out in that lie, and he had to retract that ridiculous statement. Then he joined the board of fintech company Stripe. After that, he helped launch the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. Yippee, Net Zero. Carney had also served as an advisor to Watershed. He was then named as chair of the new board of directors for Bloomberg. Then he endorsed the Labour Party's shadow chancellor Rachel Reeves to be the next chancellor of the Exchequer, which happened. And then he was part of a task force which saw the creation of a British National Wealth Fund. I don't know what that is. I haven't looked into that either. So quite a career. A bit further down here, this section is in the monetary policy in the 2019 International Monetary and Financial System. He after Donald Trump had posted on Twitter that he blamed Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell's policies, Carney piped up and he urged central banks to work together to replace the US dollar as reserve currency. So that was back in 2019, talking about getting rid of the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world. What did he think should replace it? Well, I'll give you two guesses. He suggested that a new synthetic hegemonic currency, such as Libra, which could potentially be provided through a network of central bank digital currencies that would decrease the US dollar's domineering influence on trade worldwide. So he wants us all to get a synthetic hegemonic currency, such as Libra. And what's Libra? That's a permissioned blockchain-based stable coin payment system. It's a central bank digital currency, ladies and gentlemen. So Carney is all up for getting rid of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency and using some sort of centrally controlled digital currency instead. And then it also tells us that he's taken a leading position on the need for climate action because, of course, you would have to get anywhere near any of these positions and jobs and roles that he has been enjoying. In his personal life, it was all kind of boring, apart from this bit here where it says, in addition to Canadian citizenship, he also holds Irish because two of his grandparents are from Ireland, and he holds a British citizenship. And he has distant relatives in Liverpool, and he's a supporter of Everton FC, which makes him just like you and me, because normal people like football. Therefore, this guy is relatable, and we can trust that he has our best interests at heart. And then the very last bit is what brought it all full circle and made it all click into place. And then I knew, okay, this is my preamble ramble done for tonight, which was the honours and distinctions list. He's an officer of the Order of Canada, which I hadn't heard of before either. But I guess that's similar to the medals and letters that we dole out here in the UK. But the second one down was he's a free man of the City of London. And we've talked about that as well on this series of broadcasts for this book. Free man of the City of London. I remember coming across it and thinking, what is that? Free man of the City of London. Oh, yeah. So this is the City of London, not London City. This is the City of London, the little autonomous zone in the middle of London City that has its own court system, its own police system, which is the spider at the center of the financial shenanigans that go on in the world. Or maybe it's not the spider at the center of that financial web, but it's certainly the origin of a lot of that chicanery. And I was surprised and shocked to find that they have the ability to grant the status of free man to whomever they like. And the status that they give is to acknowledge that the person receiving this award is not under the jurisdiction of a feudal lord, which sort of implies that all of us who do not have this freedom of the City of London are under the jurisdiction of some feudal lord or another. But interestingly, if you scroll down, it says, today, in this day and age, it's largely just a thing people do for fun. It doesn't really have any meaning or influence or impact in the world. Yet they're still doling it out and giving to people. But you can see a list of royal family members who've received this before. Elizabeth II, you got Louis Mountbatten, he got it. Prince Philip got it. Charles III got it. And then there's a lot of prime ministers who've had it. Clement Attlee, Winston Churchill, Thatcher. Foreign royalties have even received it. Habsburg. There's a Habsburg who got it there. Presidents of the US got it. Ulysses Grant, Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, and Eisenhower. They've all had this award. International leaders. Jan Smuts. He's pretty interesting figure. I got a few books about him. I don't know a lot about him, but he was there around there at the time of like the Boer Wars. Alan Greenspan. He was on our list that we looked at on Friday night stream. I think the Real History Project. He was listed there. Alan Greenspan. Anyway, I was going down. There he is. There's Mark Carney. 2014. He got it. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. I meant to do this. Highlight that. Bill Gates, obviously, he's got one. He's been awarded it. And then I was scrolling down. I was going through this list. I'm thinking, oh, look at all this list. There's so many names on here that I reckon. J.K. Rowling, she got it as well. Interesting. And then I found a name that was quite familiar right down here underneath the sports in the historically notable Britons. There he is. Alfred Milner, 1st Viscount Milner, 23rd of July, 1901, was awarded the freedom of the City of London. And that brings us full circle to the topic of the book, the Milner-Fabian conspiracy tonight. How about that? Isn't that neat? Isn't that cool? Isn't it good to find links and connections and map these patterns out to see that there is a big club and you're not in it, as George Carlin told us and pointed out and made so clear in his inimitable and unbeatable way. So Mark Carney, he is now the president of Chatham House that we're going to be reading about in the book tonight. And he has been awarded a freedom of the City of London, along with Lord Alfred Milner, who lends his name to the title of this book and who we learned a bit about in the first chapter, which was all about socialism. To be honest with you, I feel like Ioan Ratiu hasn't actually spent that long on the links between the Milner group and the Fabian group and how those two groups link together, because they were around at the same time. And we got a little bit of that, but I don't feel like he really fleshed out those links. But Lord Milner, nevertheless, is a very important figure because he was so close to Cecil Rhodes, and he was basically one of the founding members of the Round Table group, along with W.T. Stead and Cecil Rhodes, and he was one of the inner circles. But as is often the case with these sort of groups, it's circles within circles, within circles, within circles, and it's enigmas wrapped in mysteries, shrouded in puzzles and conundrums. So it's very hard to figure it all out. But you can get quite a lot from Wikipedia. So it's always worth checking on there to see what they admit and acknowledge. Just to point out that it's not conspiracy theory. This is just history. It's verifiable history. It's written down in their books. We started off that little preamble ramble looking at Lionel Curtis and his book, Commonwealth of God, which I'll just show you here, was a 1938 book. You see down there at the bottom. So Lionel Curtis, he came up with this idea, the Commonwealth of God, which was a 1,000-page pitch for world government. He goes on to set up the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and then the Royal Institute for International Affairs is continuing 100 years later of doing that work and handing awards out to people like Greta Thunberg, to people like David Attenborough, to Melinda Gates, to the former / current present-day Oscar-winning actor Vladimir Zelensky. And they're just all part of the same club, the same effort, the same cast of characters that are paraded in front of you, like the WWF, with these different factions and supposed rivalries going on, and everyone's like, "Ooh, he just smacked him over the head with a chair. He just threw him and crashed him through a table." Meanwhile, off stage, these people are drinking a beer together and laughing about how much money they just fleeced off all the people who paid extortionate prices for the tickets and the hot dogs and the popcorns and the beer and the paraphernalia that you get when you go to those events. They're just laughing all the way to the bank, as the saying goes. So I hope you enjoyed that preamble ramble. I thought it was a pretty good one, actually. I was really chuffed when I realized the freedom of the City of London linked Mark Carney to Alfred Milner, which links the president of Chatham House to the guy who this book's named after that we're reading. That was a really nice connection to stumble upon. And so if you enjoyed that, you can head on over to allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews, where you can find out how to subscribe to my channels or send me an email. I put this little banner on here now that just says email me. You can just click that and shoot me an email. Why not? Say hello. Tell me what you think. Give me some feedback. Ask some questions. Whatever you feel like you would like to get in touch with about, feel free to do so. I've got Telegram, Instagram, and Twixter pages that you can sign up to get news. And then I've got my YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and Entropy channels where you can watch the live streams. I've got on SoundCloud a whole album of music of me singing songs. I'm not the best singer in the world, but there are a few little ditties on there that I'm quite proud of, and that's a good fun listen. It's got some high points, some low points, and things in between. So that's there. Check out if you're interested. And I also have my free community, which is hosted on the School platform. This is called Devised, and this is what it looks like. When you click the link, you can watch a little 6-minute explainer video when I'll tell you about the different events that go on inside that. That's going to be kicking off in January, and we're going to be getting together with the members and just having some conversations, getting to know each other, putting the world to rights, no doubt. And there's also a book club in there, and we're going to be studying a book. Well, ideally, we're going to be studying many books as things progress, but the first book we're going to be studying is this one here, which is 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television by Jerry Mander. It's quite a thick book. I'm sure we've got quite a bit to get through. But I'm really looking forward to reading that one. I've never read it before, and I'm trying to get my screen use under control. I feel like I'm a screen addict, and I don't want to be a screen addict. I would like to spend more time in the real world with real human beings, maybe face-to-face with my wife and my family and my friends, and even nature. I'd like to just go and sit in the garden and stare at the clouds for a while, watch the squirrels run around and stare at the trees and listen to the wind and the traffic roaring by on the motorway behind my house. I'm feeling like my life is dominated by screens because I work all day on at the screens, and then I do my live streaming, and I've got a work phone and a personal phone, and so I'm learning about what is this technology, how did it become so ubiquitous in our lives, what does it do to us, to our minds, to our hearts, our souls, to our relationships, to our societies, and is there anything we can do to try and mitigate the damage and the harm that it's doing, maybe reverse the trends that are unfolding, right? So that's part of the motivation behind setting up the community, was to talk to other people who are concerned with these issues and maybe offer some help, some support, some group therapy to each other, maybe share some resources, point each other in the direction of how we can do something about this very insidious problem that we're all facing, because it's a blessing and a curse. It's certainly a miracle. I'm thankful that I have this technology so I can bring these broadcasts out to people, and you, wherever you are, can check in and benefit, hopefully, from the learning that we're doing on this channel. But at the same time, I go out today, I said, I've been shopping all day, and everyone's just like neck down, staring at their phones, like sitting around coffee shops, staring at their phones, and sitting on buses. Everyone's got not everyone, but a lot of people got headphones on. They got their phones looking down, and you just see that like people aren't just chatting with strangers anymore. People don't sort of strike up conversations in the way I imagine they might have done in the past. So it's kind of sad. But I don't think, like many things, I don't think it's accidental. I think it's been done by design. And I would like to know more about the history of it. I was thinking, actually, I'd like to know if anyone knows any good books about the history of how screens have been developed and changed over the years and made to be more addictive and more hypnotizing and mesmerizing, because I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure it has to be the case because they're everywhere. All the pubs, all the billboards, you know, there's screens wherever you look. They put them on buses, they put them in taxis, in foyers of hotels and offices. Menus now are screens in a lot of places. You go in and they've got animated menus. So I think something must have been done to develop that technology and to make sure that it was as hard to ignore as possible. And I don't know if there are any good books explaining that story, or the history behind that technology. So anyway, that's a real diversion and not what I'm here to talk about tonight. But that's just to say that the free community device that I'm setting up and kicking off in January is there. We're going to get together, talk about these and other topics, read some books, get to know each other, have a good time. And if you want the links to those calls, you want to join in and get on a call with me on a face-to-face, that would be very good. I would very much like to see people and give my voice a rest and not have to speak for 3 hours continuously. Actually, I do like doing these, but I'm looking for that next step now where I can see other people and have an exchange. And I do also like having conversations and a back and forth. So that's the purpose of having that. Final reminder, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews for everything you need to get involved and stay track of where I am and what I'm doing. And I've pinned that at the top of all the chats, I think. Yes, I have. So speaking of chats, let's have a look. We got on Rumble. Excuse me. Just got a tickly cough there. We got Hasdak and Turbs over on Rumble. Loads of stuff going on. Oh, we got Armory 1 as well. Good evening, everybody. Very happy to see you all there. And I'm not going to catch up and read out all those quotes and comments, but it looks like you've been having some fun. Hasdak has a good one here, which is, we are just cattle to these people, Nick. Tax cattle. It's a good way of looking at it. It does feel increasingly like I had a breakthrough moment during the lockdowns where I was like, oh, we're the best way to think of the planet or the earth is a farm. We're just farms, farmed animals, like a herd, like livestock, and increasingly more so, tracked, traced, and data-based, every action. And they've been building the system brick by brick over the long term. And so few people have taken the time to read about it and learn about it and study the history of it that it's kind of just carried on and it's been built and nobody's really been able to do anything to stop it or slow it down, right? So that's what we're here and that's what we're doing. But yeah, that's a great quote, and I totally agree with it. From their point of view, we are cattle. And, you know, this is where you get the word vaccine actually comes from the French word for cow, which is vacher or something like that. So, and cows they administer vaccines to cows through the nostril in the same way that we were told to do these nasal swabs. Like, I've never had a nasal swab in my life. Nasal swabs have never been the standard way to test for anything as far as I've been aware. Like, what's wrong with just swabbing your cheek, getting some saliva out the side of your mouth? No, it's got to go in your nose, into that cavity there where the barrier, the blood-brain barrier is super thin. And if you push too hard, it can break that and puncture and cause all kind of bleeding. And it makes me cringe just thinking about it. People just went along with it and did it, sticking those things in their nose and wriggling them around. But that's what you do to cows. That's what you do to livestock. And so those of us who did that and did that to ourselves were sort of admitting and accepting this, that point you just made, Hasdak, which, tax cattle, livestock, to be ground up and turned into hamburgers. Cool. Over on YouTube, we've had a few more people drop in since I kicked off the live stream. Got Johnny Fogg. Hello, sir. And we've got Darren as well. A Monolith. Hello to you all. I think I can catch up on these quickly because there's not too many comments there. Melissa says, I never noticed the extra Y in his name. I wonder if Chatham House awarded him that extra letter. Yeah, so this is Zelensky with 2 Y's at the end. Yeah, maybe that's what you get. They do like to give each other and themselves letters after their names, don't they? So that definitely could be it. LJ says, I can't watch Attenborough. I know. I went through a phase. I was really into his work. I found his voice very soothing. I enjoyed the footage that they managed to capture. But then there was a video of him standing on top of the London Shard lecturing everybody around how, you know, we all need to become the third world in order to save the world. Darren says, does Nick's mic seem soft? I was looking at the audio level and I was wondering if it is a little bit quiet today. I think you might be right. I'm not sure why that is. I've got an idea, but I think it's too late to rectify it now. So I'm going to try and project my voice a little more, and hopefully you can hear me all right. Darren, apologies about that, but thank you for letting me know. Monolith says, nice and cozy in here, innit? I'm glad you think so, Monolith. That's what it's all about. Settle in, settle down, pull up a comfy chair, and do some reading. So, you know, sit by the fire, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Frank Lennon says, good old Mark Carnage. He's everywhere. Talk about an insider's insider. CBDC controlled by digital currency. Yeah, CBDC controlled by digital currency. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Frank. Monolith says, in the end, tokenization and currency and all personal data will be encoded in the individual's DNA. CBDCs are just a stepping stone. Eesh. That is a terrifying thought. But it seems to me to be perfectly in line with what I know of these psychopathic parasites and the level of craziness that they are willing to go to attain their power and influence and control over people. I do think they want control over absolutely everything. I think that's their end goal, and that's what they're aiming for. And yeah, why wouldn't they? I mean, I think they would like to be able to just stamp you at birth and then have some way to control you for the rest of your life because they've put something in you that you can't take out, right? First it's on you and then it's in you. This is why all this wearable tech is so insidious. But it's why smartphones are insidious, because people get used to having it. And then the next step is, oh, it wouldn't be better if I didn't have to pull this thing out of my pocket every time I wanted to use it. Wouldn't it be better if it was just there and I could just tap my head and I would see it in my vision, you know, these kind of things. So it's that progress, step by step, just conditioning people and priming them and getting them ready for the next step that you've already planned. They've probably planned 10, 20 steps ahead, as you're saying, Monolith. And we just think, many of us just think that it's just the latest gadget that's been developed, and not realizing that they've probably planned the next 10 or so releases and stages of this technology and are rolling it out. I've just seen advertisements for AI glasses. And it was, now you can bring the power of AI to your glasses. And it was some sort of, I didn't quite understand how AI was going to be incorporated, whether AI would be used to diagnose your needs and then create the right lenses, or if there was some sort of computer on board the actual pair of glasses and it was doing something while you wore them. It wasn't clear in the thing that I saw. But yeah, they're starting to push AI glasses, so that's a thing now. Pretty soon, your fridge will be spying on you, as they told us, as Chatham House told us in 2017. Armory One says, speaking of trace and tracking, are you familiar with Sabrina Wallace of Synergy? Of The Synergy, highly recommended. I'm not familiar with Sabrina Wallace. Is that an author? What is? And I don't know what Synergy is either. So please tell us a little bit more about that. That would be good. Okay, I think it's about time to get into the book. I've got a really scratchy throat tonight. But I do know that this chapter is only 20 pages, I think. So there's a good chance we could do the whole thing. So let's give it a go. I will just get comfortable. I'll make sure the mic's close to my mouth, so hopefully the audio is coming through and it's not too soft. That looks like it's clipping about, it's hitting the right level. All right, so let's see if everything we just read on the Chatham House website is backed up and tallies and aligns with what Ioan Ratiu has to say. I think what we're going to find, though, is that Ioan Ratiu has a lot of details to include that were left out of that history. It wasn't really a history of the Chatham House, was it? It was more just like a timeline with some random events. I know this person came to speak at Chatham House, but it didn't really tell us about the numbers of members or who joined and who attended the meetings, or, it was a history, but it wasn't really a history. We probably would have got a better history from Wikipedia, to be honest, and I might have a look at that for a future preamble ramble. But anyway, let's dive into the book and see what Ioan Ratiu has to say. So this is chapter 5, Chatham House. Chatham House, aka Royal Institute of International Affairs. Oh, I've been saying Royal Institute for International Relations, haven't I? Royal Institute for International Affairs is a semi-secret, London-based sister organization of the US Council on Foreign Relations, and was ostensibly established to encourage and facilitate the study of international questions with a view to preventing future wars. Like the CFR, Royal Institute for International Affairs' true intent and purpose has been to influence government policy and public opinion in line with its creator's hidden agenda. And the reference for that is Quigley's book, Anglo-American Establishment, page 182. The origins of Chatham House. Chatham House cannot be properly investigated without some knowledge of the wider network of connections and sources of support of which it is only a part. In particular, Chatham House is inseparable from the group which created it and which for many years has dominated and used it as an instrument for its agenda. This group was the secret organisation formed in London on the 5th of February 1891 by diamond magnate Cecil Rhodes of De Beers for the purpose of extending British rule throughout the world. Originally called the Society of the Elect, the group later came to be known by various names at various times, including the Secret Society of Cecil Rhodes, the Round Table Group, the Milner Group, and, significantly, the Chatham House Crowd. The key planks in the group's drive for world domination were 1. Cultural and political union of the United Kingdom with the British Empire, the UK's colonies and other territories. 2. Union of the British Empire with America. And 3. The worldwide organisation of states around the proposed Anglo-American Empire. As the group's stated overarching aim was to extend its rule throughout the world, international and especially Anglo-American relations were high on its agenda. Anglo-American interests close to the Milner Group had already set up various outfits promoting closer links between Britain and America. Among these were the Anglo-American League and the Pilgrim Society. The Anglo-American League was founded in London and New York in 1898 and revolved on the belief that Britain and America had strong common interests in many parts of the world. So they have a special relationship, in other words. The Pilgrim Society was founded in London in 1902, with a New York branch being set up in the following year, and was based on similar beliefs. Similarly, to achieve its objective of world organization around the Anglo-American Empire, the group set up a series of organizations such as the League to Enforce Peace and the League of Free Nations Association, with corresponding outfits across the Atlantic. The immediate precursor to the Anglo-American Institute of International Affairs was the Committee of International Relations, aka Council on Foreign Relations, which was originally founded in New York in 1918. The Institute of International Affairs itself was conceived by the Milner Group during the 1919 Peace Conference of Paris and was organised under the leadership of Lionel Curtis, a prominent member of the Milner Group, in collaboration with members of the Fabian Society. Among these were R. H. Tawney, John Maynard Keynes, and Philip Noel Baker. Also involved were Fabian collaborators and sympathisers like LSE Professor Arnold J. Toynbee, who became Chatham House Director of Studies, and Lord Astor. Astor, a leading Milnerite, was a friend of the Fabian leadership. The American group mainly consisted of associates of the Morgan Group, the leading element in the Eastern establishment of bankers, businessmen, lawyers, and academics revolving around Wall Street's interests. It included John Foster and Alan Dulles of the Wall Street firm Sullivan and Cromwell, who were nephews of President Wilson's Secretary of State, Robert Lansing. Cristian Herter of the U.S. State Department, General Tasker Bliss, U.S. Representative, Inter-Allied Supreme War Council, as well as Thomas W. Lamont of the New York private investment bank J.P. Morgan & Co., Whitney H. Shepherdson, a Rhodes Scholar, who later became head of the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, Secret Intelligence Branch, and Fabian socialist Walter Lippmann, who were members of the American branch of the Milner Group. As noted in the previous chapter, the American branch of the Institute was officially formed in 1921 around the Morgan Group's earlier organization and was named Council on Foreign Relations. The British branch of the Institute was founded in London in 1920 as the British Institute of International Affairs, becoming the Royal Institute of International Affairs in 1926. It was later called Chatham House after the building housing its headquarters in London's St. James's Square, which was itself appropriately named after the first Earl of Chatham, Secretary of State William Pitt the Elder, who was a leader of the Whig Party. Like the CFR in the United States, Chatham House fulfilled its intended purpose by soon acquiring a dominant position in foreign policy making, a position it retains to this day. This was achieved by gradually infiltrating and taking over the Foreign Office, which it made into an instrument of the Milner Group and, by extension, of the Anglo-American establishment. Chatham House consisted of a governing body first called Executive Committee and later Council, led by a chairman and 2 honorary secretaries and a small number of paid employees, and was headed by 3 presidents. The first honorary secretaries were leading Milnerites Lionel Curtis and G. M. Gathorne Hardy, and the council remained dominated by the Milner Group, which provided about half of the councillors until 1960. Most of the paid staff were agents of Curtis. Chatham House members were recruited from among Britain's leading academics, civil servants, members of the armed services, politicians and businessmen. Its elite membership, which rose from about 300 to 2,414 by 1936, was clearly designed to give an impression of expert competence while having presidents, a largely honorary position, from all 3 main parties conveyed a false sense of political impartiality. In reality, like its Milnerite creators, Chatham House has always been liberal, i.e., left of the centre. Chatham House operates by analysing global, regional and national problems, often in close collaboration with the Fabian Society and other Fabian outfits, and proposing solutions to decision makers in the Foreign Office and Whitehall that are in line with Milner-Fabian thinking. Its house journal is International Affairs, formerly Journal, in addition to which it issues The World Today, as well as 50 similar reports and other publications annually. The Milner Group's organ, the Round Table, was also edited from Chatham House grounds. This bit's interesting, actually, about how they had presidents from all 3 main parties. And the idea was to promote a sense of political impartiality. But the way I see that really is that all the 3 main parties are the same. It's the same establishment of managerial bureaucrats who want to bring in a technocratic system of control for everybody else that doesn't apply to them because they're living their life of luxury and abundance, and slavery for everyone is freedom for them. And that's why in the 1984 book, as we read on the Modern History Project website, slavery is freedom is slavery is freedom. Freedom is slavery. Because ignorance is strength, meaning ignorance for the masses is strength for this group. Yeah. And so the pantomime of different political groups is presented as a kind of bread and circus show for the masses to lap up and believe in and believe that is how government and governance is carried out. But actually, you've got groups like the Royal Institute for International Affairs, where members from all the political parties are showing up and taking part. Okay, so this is a group that is above and beyond and outside of those political, those sort of artificial and largely fake political divide, the left-right divide. It's not really a divide. It's two wings of the same bird, isn't it? And the kind of little mischievous gremlin who's riding the bird is the Royal Institute for International Affairs. Anyway, carrying on after that ridiculous metaphor. Chatham House and international finance. It is evident from those involved in the formation and financing of the Anglo-American Institute of International Affairs that it represented certain financial interests from inception. These interests had already been involved in the formation of earlier organizations such as the Anglo-American League and the Pilgrim Society. The League included Prime Minister and Milner-Fabian godfather Arthur, later Lord Balfour, a close Rothschild friend and collaborator whose family had also founded the Society for Psychical Research in 1882, and the Duke of Sutherland on the London side, and various Morgan associates like Daniel S. Lamont and William C. Whitney on the New York side. The Pilgrims similarly included Britons like Arthur Balfour and the 7th Duke of Newcastle, Americans like J.P. Morgan himself and associates. Unsurprisingly, we find the same interests among those providing funds to the Institute: J.P. Morgan & Co., the Carnegie Trust, and J.D. Rockefeller, as well as various institutions with Milner Group members on their board of directors, such as the U.S. car maker Ford Motor Company, the Bank of England, Lazard Brothers, and N.M. Rothschild & Sons. As pointed out by Professor Quigley, the American branch of these money interests revolved around the J.P. Morgan Bank of New York and its associates, such as the Rockefeller Schiff Group, which were part of America's Eastern establishment. The British branch was based on the private bank Lazard Brothers & Co., which had branches in New York, London, and Paris. And its associates, including the Bank of England, Barclays Bank, Lloyds Bank, Westminster Bank, Baring Brothers, and N.M. Rothschild, which all had Milner Group members on their board of directors. This Anglo-American Morgan-Lazard connection, stretching from the City of London to Wall Street, was the backbone of the Milner Group and its international organization. On the British side, Lazard Brothers, N.M. Rothschild, the Bank of England, Barclays Bank, Lloyds Bank, Midland Bank, Westminster Bank, Baring Brothers, Hambros Bank, Stern Brothers, as well as the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the Anglo-Saxon Petroleum Company, and Reuters were among the corporate members of Chatham House. With regard to Lord Rothschild, co-founder and member of the Society of the Elect's Inner Circle, Quigley makes the implausible claim that he was largely indifferent to the Milner project and held aloof. The evidence shows that in addition to financing Rhodes de Beers, Rothschild was a loyal supporter of his imperialist plans in the 1890s, and that the Rothschilds, their agents and associates, continued to take an interest in the Society's activities and projects. Natty's French cousin Edmond de Rothschild hosted the U.S. delegation to the Paris Peace Conference, which included J.P. Morgan Jr. and Morgan Associates, Thomas Lamont, and US Ambassador to the UK John William Davis, who were involved in the formation of the Council on Foreign Relations. Lamont, partner and later head of JP Morgan, was the first financial sponsor of the Anglo-American project, advancing £2,000 for the writing of a history of the Paris Peace Conference, and N.M. Rothschild itself became a corporate member of Chatham House. The close connections between N.M. Rothschild, Lazar, and Morgan interests are shown in Mullins, Chart 1, page 92 to 94, and must be beyond dispute. South African gold magnate Sir Abe Bailey, a Rothschild Rhodes partner and Milner Group chief financial supporter, funded the committee which organised the Institute of International Affairs and set up an endowment to fund its British side. The latter was chaired by Lord Robert Cecil, who had been chairman of the Supreme Economic Council during the Paris Conference. Cecil's financial advisor was Robert, later Lord Brand, who later became a partner and managing director of Lazard Brothers, a director of Lloyds Bank and Milner Group leader. As brother-in-law of Lady Nancy Astor, Brand was related by marriage to another prominent Milnerite and Chatham House financier, Lord Astor, the owner of leading newspaper The Times and The Observer. Lord Astor became chairman of the Chatham House Council in 1935. The proximity of the Astors to Chatham House is aptly illustrated by their London residence just across St. James's Square from Chatham House. Milner himself, in addition to being a director of the Rothschild-controlled mining company Rio Tinto, was director of several public banks, particularly the London Joint Stock Bank, later Midland Bank, which, as already noted, became Chatham House corporate member. Sorry, I was muted there. Let me retake that bit. I was here. Earlier Anglo-American organisations, founded by the same interests, claimed to foster closer links between Britain and America. However, their true intention was to harmonise British and American foreign policy in line with the agenda of the financial interests behind these organisations. The Pilgrim Society in particular was working closer and closer with the British Foreign Office and its American counterpart, the US State Department. This pattern was faithfully followed by the Money Powers global network of organisations, and Chatham House was no exception. Chatham House and socialism. The Milner Group, which operated in liberal and conservative circles, derived much of its ideology from Arnold Toynbee's socialist-style theories of social reform. Although he described himself as an English nationalist, Milner Group leader Alfred Milner was in fact a notorious socialist. In the 1890s, as chairman of the Board of Internal Revenue, he introduced the inheritance tax in England, imposed heavy taxes in South Africa to fund social improvements, and contemplated the nationalisation of railways and mines. In addition, although the connection is often missed by researchers, there has always been a close collaboration between the Milner Group and the Fabian Society, which is a socialist organisation. As noted above, several prominent Fabians like R.H. Tawney, John Maynard Keynes, and Philip Noel Baker were involved in the formation of Chatham House. Noel Baker, who later became a leader of the Fabian International and Colonial Bureau, the American Walter Lippmann, and others were members of both the Fabian Society and the Milner Group. Labour Party chairman, later Lord Privy Seal and Home Minister John R. Clines, who operated in Fabian circles, was a member of the Chatham House Council from the start, as well as president. Arthur Creech Jones, member of the Fabian Society Executive, was also a member of the CH Council. That's the Chatham House Council. Sir Arthur Salter, a former member of the Fabian Society and later prominent Milnerite, was appointed acting chairman of the Chatham House Council in 1931 and remained a member of the council. Other Fabian members of the Chatham House Council were Lord Snell of the Fabian Society and Labour Party executives, and Dennis Healy of the Fabian Executive. Chatham House was in close contact with the Fabian Society's War Aims Committee, the League of Nations Union, and associated Milner-Fabian outfits during World War II. In fact, Milner-Fabian connections go back to the early 1900s, when members of both groups attended typical liberal labour organisations like the Rainbow Circle and the Coefficients Club, described earlier. While the Coefficients connected Fabians with the upper tiers of Britain's power structure, consisting of wealthy, powerful and influential Milnerites from the world of banking, industry and politics, who sought to bring about change by gradual and peaceful means, the Rainbow Circle connected them with the more radical lower strata, which included intellectuals, writers, far-left politicians and leaders of workers' associations whose aim was to enforce change by more forceful means, such as armed revolution. This placed the Rainbow Circle on a par with the Fabians' other subversive outfit, the Socialist International. In particular, the Rainbow Circle connected Fabians with thousands of immigrants in London and New York who called for revolution in Russia and Germany and enjoyed the support of Anglo-American establishment leaders like the Rothschilds and their agents. A Rainbow Circle associate of particular interest was the London-based Society of Friends of Russian Freedom, whose leaders had close links to Russia's Socialist Revolutionary Party, which initiated the 1917 revolution, as well as to the international money power. During the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, Jacob Schiff of the New York private investment bank Kuhn, Loeb & Co., a Rothschild representative, associate of the Morgan Group and whose Japan Society, was later involved in the founding of the Council on Foreign Relations, provided funds to Russian groups and used the Friends of Russian Freedom to promote revolutionary propaganda. At the same time, Schiff and his European Rothschild associates provided large loans to Russia's adversary, Japan. As a result of these machinations, Russia was plunged into revolution in 1905 and again in 1917. As already noted, while Schiff and his Rothschild associates were putting pressure on Russia by providing loans to Japan and promoting revolution, prominent Fabian Society member Joseph Fels, who was married to Fanny Rothschild's daughter, Mary Fels, provided a loan of £1,700, which was a substantial amount at the time, in addition to pocket money in the sum of one gold sovereign per delegate, to Lenin, Trotsky and their Russian Social Democratic Labour Party during their 1907 London conference. In February 1917, the Tsar was overthrown by the revolutionary government of Alexander Kerensky, a leading member of Russia's Socialist Revolutionary Party, which was the Friends of Russia's contact. This enabled Lenin to stage his own coup later that year, replacing Kerensky's government with his own Social Democratic Party, which later became the Communist Party. The Russian-born Julius Rappaport, aka Julius West, a member of the Fabian Society Executive Committee, made several trips to Russia in 1917 and was present at the Second Russian Congress of Soviets at the Petrograd Smolny Institute on the 7th to the 9th of November, during which Lenin declared his new communist government. In addition to British Fabian connections, Russia's communist regime also had links to officials of the Russian and English Bank, which was run by Milnerite and friend of the Fabian leadership Arthur Balfour and his collaborators. The Milner Group's influence on the British government itself is beyond dispute. In the period 1919 to 1939, it held between 1/5 and 1/3 of cabinet posts. The group dominated Liberal Prime Minister Lloyd George's 1916 to 1924 government, which included Milnerites like Arthur Balfour, Leo Amery, Samuel Hoare, Lord Robert Cecil, and Lord Astor. Milner himself became Secretary for War in 1918 and Colonial Secretary in the following year, while his fellow Milnerite Chatham House co-founder and later member of the council, Philip Kerr, was private secretary to Lloyd George. The Milner-dominated Lloyd George administration engineered the 1921 Anglo-Soviet Trade Agreement. This in turn led to diplomatic relations being established in 1924 under Labour's Ramsay MacDonald, a notorious admirer of communist Russia, whose son, an intimate associate to Malcolm, became a Milner Group member and, in 1933, was elected Chatham House councillor. Diplomatic relations with Russia were broken off in 1927 under Stanley Baldwin's Conservative government, when it was found that Russia had been profiting more from the arrangement than Britain, while at the same time working against British interests in China and elsewhere. But they were resumed in 1929 under Labour Prime Minister and Milner collaborator Ramsay MacDonald. The establishment of trade relations with Russia helped its communist regime to survive and impose itself on the Russian people. The importance of communist Russia to Chatham House circles is confirmed by the joint visit to that country in 1931 by Lord Astor, later chair of the Chatham House Council, and his Fabian friend Bernard Shaw, who believed that Lenin was the greatest statesman of Europe. As noted by Quigley, the system advocated by the Milner Group was an undemocratic kind of socialism. The whole point of socialism, of course, was state control over trade, markets, and resources, and this is where socialism fitted with the global designs of monopolistic capitalism, which Milner-Fabian groups clearly represented. On the other side of the Atlantic, too, we can find international financiers, Milner-Fabian associates, and Chatham House sponsors, like David Rockefeller, who were in fact socialists, as noted earlier. David wrote a sympathetic thesis on Fabian socialism at Harvard in 1936. International financiers like those behind Chatham House and the Milner Group supported socialism because socialist administrators who believed in state monopoly of trade, markets, and resources promised to run societies and their economies in ways that offered more advantages to the monopolistic capitalist elites than mainstream liberal democracies could. Otherwise put, it was an alliance of monopolistic financiers and monopolistic revolutionaries. For the same reason, the same financiers, like the head of the Milner-associated Morgan Group, Thomas Lamont, supported fascism in Italy. These groups' ultimate objective of monopolizing power is evident from the fact that Fabian leaders like Bernard Shaw too supported fascism, declaring in 1927, quote, "We must get the socialist movement out of its old democratic grooves," and, quote, "We as socialists have nothing to do with liberty." That's the tricky part of this, I think, that can be confusing. It's like, why would bankers work with socialists and communists? Why would the Rockefellers, you know, an incredibly powerful and wealthy family of capitalists, you know, business owners, why would they work with socialists? That's what's surprising, and I think that's what's left out a lot of the times from mainstream education, and it's why books like Carol Quigley's are never, you got to dig around to find people who talk about them, and they're never, as far as I'm aware, part of mainstream curricula in schools and universities, because there's that sort of dialectic of capitalism on one side, or what you're told is capitalism on one side, and then what you're told is a communistic, socialistic system on the other side. There's and one is blamed for being greedy and the cause of all the problems of the world today, and the other, socialism and government and regulation, is pitched as the solution to that. But actually behind the scenes, they're working. The people on both sides are working together, like the two competing groups in the WWF, or the red team and the blue team in the political system. They're just working together to give you this performative show of conflict and competition, and where the ideologies don't mix, but actually behind the scenes and off stage they do, and you're being sort of shepherded towards a merging of those systems. And I think that is hard to wrap your head around sometimes. It can be why these sorts of books are not so well known or not widely read. As I said in a previous video, I find this stuff very fascinating and interesting, but kind of hard to read and sort of boring as well, because it's just a lot of names. But gradually, the more books I read on this topic and the more I listen back to these replays, and I start to build up that map and that network and that make those connections stronger in my mind, I don't find reading this kind of thing quite as overfacing when I have touch points for these sorts of names. And like here, he mentions David wrote a sympathetic thesis on Fabian socialism. In a previous live stream, we pulled the book down from the shelf over there, found the page number, and yes, he does say that. David Rockefeller does claim to have written his thesis on Fabian socialism, so that's true according to David Rockefeller. So these books and topics are, I find at least, quite challenging, but I think the more time you spend on them, chewing them over, getting familiar with the names and the places and the groups, the better and clearer the picture becomes, and the easier it becomes to explain and talk about and describe to other people. But you do have to put in a bit of work. It is a bit of work, I'm not going to lie. But fair play to everyone who's tuning in and checking this out. I hope you're all enjoying it. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe if you feel like you can do that. That would be a massive help to me. Thank you very much. Got a few more sections to get through, so I think we'll continue with Chatham House and world government. It is beyond dispute that the overarching objective of Chatham House's Milnerite masters was to establish world government. From the start, it had been their stated intention to extend British rule throughout the world. And leading Milnerites like Lionel Curtis openly advocated various forms of world government in publications like the Commonwealth of Nations, written just a few years before the formation of an Institute of Foreign Relations. And that reminds me as well, when it says here they're aiming for British rule throughout the world, and people say, yeah, but then the British Empire was dismantled and turned into a Commonwealth, and now the Britain has no power in the world. It reminds me of a point that Richard Grove makes all the time, which is, what clothes do people wear throughout the world, right? When you go to a business meeting in China, they're not wearing traditional Chinese clothes. Just like if you go to a business meeting in Japan or probably any country, people are wearing a suit and a tie and a shirt. And where does that come from? This method, this way of doing business, this way of having a central bank, of doling out money, fiat currency backed by nothing. These are the patterns which have been rolled out everywhere. The patterns of behavior, the systems that have been rolled out everywhere. So it's not about, Britain overtly controls that territory over there anymore. Now it's more subtle. Now it's more tortoise-like, the Fabian way of get into the system, change it from within, and match it and morph it to what you want it, mold it to the heart's desire from within, right? So even though you have on the face of it different countries, but when you don't need to look that deep to see that it's actually the same systems everywhere. Pretty much anywhere you go, you get off the plane, walk out into the city, and you're going to find the same kinds of businesses, the same ways of doing business, the same etiquette, and the same systems, whether that's telecommunication systems, whether it's financial systems with an ATM and a card and punt in the number and get the cash out. Like it's slowly becoming a homogenized system. And like I said at the beginning, I think the system's already here. They just haven't announced it yet. They just haven't said you're living in this system. And they're like putting in the infrastructure, putting in the hardware, linking it all up, letting people think that you're living in different systems, competing nations and nation states, and then at some point they'll flick the switch, they'll kick off the psyop, and that'll be the psyop that everyone is united under to say, no, we need to have a one world system now, because the only way we can get through this crisis is to have a one world system. So this world government thing, 100 years old, if not older. I don't know how old it is, the idea, but certainly at least 100 years, because it's talking about Lionel Curtis's book here. And they've been putting the building blocks in place gradually, little by little, slowly but surely, ever since then, right? Anyway, back to the book. As already noted, the Milner Group's aim was to establish a worldwide socialist-style dictatorship led by a self-appointed administrative elite, that is, the Milner Group itself. This means that when they talked about extending British rule throughout the world, they really meant Milner Group rule, and not rule by the British people or even by the democratically elected British government. Similarly, the Milner Group's international associates aimed to establish a world system of financial control concentrated in private hands, which would enable them to dominate the world's economy and politics. The internationalist motives of Chatham House's creators are further evidenced by their involvement in international projects like the Commonwealth of Nations and the League of Nations, which they didn't really mention either of those on their little About Me history page on their website, did they? Having world organization as their principal objective, as well as by subsequent publications such as Civitas Dei, the Commonwealth of God, aka World Order by Curtis. In the early 1950s, Chatham House councillor Dennis Healy was instrumental in the creation of organisations aiming to establish world government, such as the Socialist International and the Bilderberg Group. The latter, in Healy's own words, worked for a united global governance. Of course, the international money interests have been careful to conceal the true reason behind their drive for world government. Publicly, their position has been that taken by H.G. Wells, Curtis and Bryce in The Idea of a League of Nations, and taken up by Healy, who was also on the Fabian executive in the 1960s, namely that only an advanced form of world government could guarantee world peace. It would take a world government to enforce world peace on everybody, right? Chatham House and the Commonwealth. Another reason why the Milner Group's patriotic credentials must be open to question is that by the 1920s, i.e. the time when they created Chatham House, they had introduced the concept of a Commonwealth as a substitute for the British Empire. Already in 1907, the Milner Group had suggested the creation of a Dominion Department in the Colonial Office, recognising the separate existence of self-governing dominions, i.e. Canada, Australia and New Zealand, followed by South Africa in 1910 and India in 1947, etc. In 1908, the group began to publicise the idea of a British Commonwealth of Nations, and a Dominion Office was finally created in 1925 with Milnerite Leo Amery as secretary. The Milner-dominated Imperial Conference of 1926 issued the Balfour Declaration, which recognised the UK and the Dominions as equal members of the British Commonwealth. The UK delegation to the conference was made up of the Lord President of the Council, Lord Balfour, Foreign Secretary Austin Chamberlain, Colonial Secretary Leo Amery, Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, and Chancellor of the Exchequer Winston Churchill. Cabinet Secretary Colonel Maurice Hankey, Whitehall's man of secrets, was Secretary General of the conference. Balfour, Chamberlain, Amery and Hankey belonged to the Milner Group. Baldwin and Churchill, who had been a Liberal until 1924, were clearly collaborators. This not only shows the extraordinary influence of the Milner Group, it also exposes its anti-British policies. Self-government for the colonies was a central plank in the Milnerite agenda. Like Curtis, Philip Kerr, a leading Milnerite and editor of the Milner publication The Round Table, who became private secretary to Lloyd George and later Chatham House councillor, advocated self-government for the colonies by 1916. While the Milner Group started off claiming to make Britain the centre of a world empire, it soon began to work for the dissolution of the empire and the incorporation of Britain into a world government run by the international financial interests represented by the group. Transforming the British Empire into a commonwealth of nations equal in status, and then placing that commonwealth within an international organisation like the League of Nations, was the first step in the dissolution of the empire and Britain's subordination to world government. Professor Quigley detected logical deficiencies in Milnerite foreign relations thinking. Indeed, there can be no such thing as an empire of equal and independent nations. But once the Milner Group had started campaigning for self-government for the colonies, the outcome was entirely predictable. While some Milnerites may have been pathologically delusional, it is hard to believe that an army of Oxford and Cambridge educated experts were unaware of what they were doing. Deliberate deception becomes much more likely than logical deficiency, particularly in light of the fact that Milner Group policies were essentially identical to those of its chief anti-empire collaborator, the Fabian Society. The Milner Group was happy to embrace all the developments that destroyed the dominions linked to the mother country. As already noted, many of these developments were created by the Milner Group itself. Between 1933 and 1945, the Milner Group held secret conferences on British Commonwealth relations, leading to the breakup of the British Empire and the creation of the Commonwealth in 1948. All the conferences were arranged and controlled by Milnerite Chatham House members, including Lord Lothian, Sir Herbert Samuel, W.G.A. Ormsby Gore, Lord Haley, A.J. Toynbee, Alfred Zimmern, and many others. So out of all those names, it's only been Alfred Zimmern and A.J. Toynbee and Lionel Curtis, actually, they got a mention on the Chatham House website. Some of the Chatham House members involved in these conferences were notorious anti-imperialist members of the Fabian Society, like Arthur Creech Jones and Ernest Bevin. In addition to the breakup of the empire, the Milner Group's true agenda is exposed by its pivotal role in the creation of organizations aiming to establish world government like the League of Nations, the United Nations, and the European Union, all of which represented not very British international money interests. I just have to take a sip there and I will pause a little bit to review the comments. And we got about a couple more pages to do. About 6 or 7 more pages in this chat. But I'm just going to have a sip. That's it, I'm out of water, so I hope my voice can make it to the rest of the video. Over on Rumble chat, I've got Turb saying the sound is fine. That's good to hear. And R Murray 1 is back with Sabrina Wallace. You have to dig a bit. She worked installing 5G when it came out and researches body area network, etc. Thought it was complete bollocks till I actually looked into it. Okay, nice. I'll keep an eye out for the name Sabrina Wallace. Cool. It looks like we had a message retracted as well over on YouTube. No problem. Feel free to comment again if you fancy. And silence. Crickets over on Odyssey. That's all good though. Right. Yeah. So it's like the common theme really that's running behind the scenes and really explaining what is going on here is the money. Follow the money, and it's the financial interests. Like I was saying, even though this plan started off with the idea of extending British rule over the whole world, what has actually happened instead is the extending of a financial system all over the world. I remember going to Vietnam and being amazed that I could just put my UK card into a Vietnamese ATM machine and withdraw money, and it came out of the machine in Vietnamese currency. And I was like, what? I didn't expect that to work at all, and it did. And I thought that's quite amazing that the cash machines there were synced up and connected to my bank account back here in Burnley in England, which is where I had my bank account at the time. I hadn't told them I was going to be there. I just took my card over, put it into the machine, typed the number in, and withdrew a lot of Vietnamese dong. Actually, the currency is called dong, D-O-N-G. And I was a millionaire instantly. And that was a good feeling to be a millionaire. I mean, when people say they're a millionaire, it's very important to know what currency they're talking about. Because if it's Korean won, for example, or Vietnamese dong, then it doesn't take much to be a millionaire. But yeah, it's this, like I was saying before, there are systems in place, international systems of travel, finance, obviously transport, import, export type deals. It's been established and built and created, and we're kind of analyzing the history of how that was done behind the scenes while there was this, while people were being given a storyline of war and competition and attacks and invasions, and all of that really was just masking a behind the scenes coordination and building of a system that I think we're all being pied pipered into wherever we live. I don't think there's much to be gained at this point by moving abroad and leaving and going to go to another country because this one's going down the pan. I think we're in it now as a global, as a species. We're in it now as a species. We've got a parasite within our ranks, and it's trying to get all of us locked into this digital system. And this is why now wherever you go, you can see people glued to their smartphones, because it's the rollout of this system that started with, we'll spread British rule everywhere, and over time has gradually morphed by way of driven by technology, the technological advances, the rollout of the internet, the hooking up of everybody to the internet. Banking was made digital, and social media, YouTube video sharing network websites were rolled out to homogenize people's worldview and culture, and to influence. Like even in Vietnam, where I spend a lot of time, there's a huge difference between the younger generation who've grown up with the internet and smartphones and the generation above them. Like a massive gap between the two. And the younger generation is much more westernized, to the point where the younger generation now will celebrate Christmas, which in the older generations of Vietnamese people never celebrated Christmas, because they don't celebrate it in that country. It's not part of their culture. They don't have a large Christian population. So Christmas was really just a Western thing that now young people celebrate because they've been exposed to a lot more Western media and films and TV and teachers. I was a Western teacher going over there teaching about holidays in the West, and that's the doing away with national identity and national cultures, cuisines, ways of dressing, ways of doing business, ways of trading, local knowledge of arts and crafts and growing food, and all the information and the knowledge that comes along with living on the land for many generations. All of that is what's really under attack, because it's about drawing everyone into the same system now. And I think that's kind of what we're reading about here. It's the history of that system. It's largely pushed by the financiers, by the money makers who make money magically out of nothing. Just poof, press a button, and they've somehow conned or blackmailed or threatened or coerced the whole, like pretty much all the nations of the world now are under the cosh of these financiers, and you're forced wherever you go, you have to use some kind of central bank produced currency, and it's not that easy now to barter and trade and do skills exchanges and get people to open their mind to that way of moving forward. Although if there is some sort of financial collapse, or during the transition to the new system, if there's some sort of Great Depression type scenario, those things might come back, and being able to do barter and negotiation and have something to trade could be very valuable again in the future. You just never know. So it's always good to have something to trade just in case. But all right, let's crack on with the book. Finish these last few chapters. Got about 40 minutes left or so, maybe half an hour, but see how far we get. We should be able to finish this chapter off, I think. Let's see, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got about 6, 7 pages. 8. All right. So this next bit is Chatham House and the League of Nations. Chatham House and the League of Nations were established at the same time. This was no coincidence. Both organizations were created by the same people as part of the same plan. Among the earliest British groups studying international organization, or world government, were the International Agreements Committee of the Fabian Research Bureau, headed by Leonard Woolf, and the Council for the Study of International Relations, a liberal Fabian outfit run by Privy Councillor Willoughby H. Dickinson, and former ambassador to the US Lord James Bryce, for which reason it was called the Bryce Group. The two groups worked together and in early 1915 established the League of Nations Society to promote their League idea, in collaboration with its American counterpart, the League to Enforce Peace. They actually called it that, the League to Enforce Peace. The LEP was established in June 1915 and was led by former President William Howard Taft and Jacob Schiff of Kuhn Loeb, among others. By 1916, Under Secretary for Foreign Affairs Lord Robert Cecil, a cousin of Milnerite Lord Balfour and Milner Group member, began to agitate for a League of Nations together with other Milnerites like General Jan Smuts, and, after persuading the cabinet to support a League of Nations and instigating the Phillimore Committee, which drafted the League Covenant, became the chief government spokesman for the League. By 1918, the idea of a League had mustered support in almost all circles of British life. Its liberal Fabian promoters launched another association, the League of Free Nations Association, calling for a league to be set up even before the war had ended. The LFNA operated in parallel with an American outfit of the same name, which later became the infamous Foreign Policy Association. Later that year, Woolf, the Dickinsons, and their collaborators amalgamated the two associations to form the League of Nations Union, which had Milnerites Lord Grey and Balfour as honorary presidents, and was officially associated with the American League to Enforce Peace. Here again, the Anglo-American Milner-Fabian connection becomes clear. Quigley observes, not without justification, that the Milner Group's ability to mobilize public opinion in support of the League of Nations was almost beyond belief. But the group's ability becomes less surprising if we consider all the interests involved and the enormous resources they had at their disposal. Both the Milnerites and the Fabian collaborators strenuously denied any intention of establishing a world state, and their proposed league had all appearance of being limited in scope and purpose. But in 1918, using typical Milnerite doublespeak, Lord Robert himself insisted that the league must include all nations, as otherwise it would inevitably aim at world domination, and even suggested that nations should be compelled to join the league by economic or other forms of pressure. And that bit reminds me of when we were doing a little reading on the United Nations, and it talked about how membership is voluntary, but if you don't join and you break the rules then there's consequences, right? I'm paraphrasing. That's basically what it says on Wikipedia about the United Nations. So it's kind of like you don't have to join, but if you don't, we'll punish you. All right, continuing. The League of Nations Union set up a research committee made up of the usual Milner-Fabian mix of Lionel Curtis, Lord Grey, Alfred Zimmern, Leonard Woolf, and H.G. Wells, all notorious advocates of various forms of international government and one world state. If the Milner Group honestly did not want an international organization that restricted national sovereignty, what was it doing collaborating with world statist fanatics like Woolf and Wells? And why did its league, as proposed by the LNU, have a council, court, and armed international police force to enforce the decisions of the league and maintain international order if it was not a state? Moreover, such an organization could only have worked by restricting national sovereignty. There was no guarantee whatsoever that it would not be misused by rogue governments or private groups like the Milner Group, the Fabian Society, and the international financiers behind them, aiming at world domination, nor indeed that it would be a democratic alliance. Conservative papers from the Morning Post to the Daily Telegraph correctly identified some of these points. Unfortunately, not only had the Conservatives allowed themselves to be taken by surprise, but instead of organizing a proper counterattack, they chose to ignore the issue for the first few years, allowing themselves to be pushed even further into a defensive corner by the left. When they finally began to wake up to reality, they still failed to expose the Milnerite-Fabian string pullers behind the League conspiracy, taking instead to accusing the Germans, who actually opposed the League, lashing out at the Labour Party, again missing the Fabians and the Milner Group, or grumbling about unidentified foreign intriguers, pointless without further details or evidence. Even worse, by 1918, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Spectator, and others had slowly changed their tune and began, however reluctantly, to accept the League idea. This was in fact not in the least surprising. The Milner Groups and the Fabian Society's true expertise was in permeating, i.e. manipulating and infiltrating governments and private organizations. Its massive campaign did not fail to win support from all parties, especially from the Liberal and Labour parties, which the Milner Group and the Fabian Society respectively dominated, and which themselves were zealous promoters of the League. By 1918, both the Liberal and the Labour parties had made the League a central plank in their official platform. Conservatives, of course, totally rejected the idea, but some, like Lord Lansdowne and above all, leading Milnerite Lord Robert Cecil himself, were squarely behind it. This clearly exposes the Milner-Fabian origin of the scheme. It also exposes the Conservatives' totally inadequate response. Was it an inadequate response, though? You know, like, I remember Chris over on Happening TV, Mr. Newsfist, he was talking about the Conservatives in the run-up to the election. The Conservatives basically... Sorry, not the Conservatives, the Democrats over in America. He was covering the American election on November the 5th, and he was saying that Kamala's campaign was basically non-existent. Trump was out there, playing the crowds, doing the rallies, great advertising, lots of good speech writing and all that sort of stuff. Whereas Kamala's was very half-assed, as we'd say in English, in Britain. She didn't pull out all the stops. She wasn't going for it. And it's almost like they didn't show up. But my question is, like, don't you think that's deliberate? Don't you think if one party has a really strong case and is really doing well and supporting something, and the other one doesn't seem to be reacting in the way you would expect it to, my maybe cynical, perhaps conspiracy-minded way of interpreting that would be, well, they've been told to stand down. And like here, he's sort of saying, oh, the Conservatives had an inadequate response. They were told to stand down. They don't act independently. They receive their orders, right, from the people who fund them, and they were just told, well, you back this thing, or you don't get the money, or you don't stand up, you don't criticize this thing because we want it to go through, and then you'll get voted on the next rotation of the merry-go-round when it's your turn to come in and push through the next few steps of our plan, right? So to me, it's not that the Conservatives. If only the Conservatives had spoken up, back then things would be different now. No, I think it was they were doing what they were told. They had a role to play, and that role involved being providing an adequate response, putting up no kind of fight, and just being like a bit half-assed, as we say. Continuing. That vested interests fully intended to use the League for their own purposes is especially clear from statements by leading Labourite Ramsay MacDonald to the effect that socialist parties in each member nation's parliament should foster common international policies. The direction in which things were moving was exposed by the February 1918 Inter-Allied Labour and Socialist Conference of London, in which the socialist parties of the future League members adopted Labour's Fabian-designed position on the League. With former Labour Party leader and leading Fabian Arthur Henderson as president of the Socialist International Executive Committee, it is clear who was calling the shots in large sections of international socialism. While the Milner Group itself professed to be for a League with limited powers, it was obvious that its Fabian allies wanted a League that came very close to a superstate, as noted by the New York Times. And that article is a New York Times article from the 22nd of September 1918 called Plans for Socialistic World. As the Fabians and their socialist associates were far more numerous than the Milner Group and growing in influence and power, it must have been apparent even to intellectually deficient Milnerites what kind of league they were creating. It follows that it was just another case of typical Milner-Fabian dissimulation. In any case, having persuaded Lloyd George's coalition government to back their scheme, the Milner-Fabian Combine used Walter Lippmann, Ray Stannard Baker, and other connections to President Woodrow Wilson and his advisor Colonel House to drum up support for their league for the prevention of war. At the 1919 Peace Conference of Paris, the League was finally conceived, and so was Chatham House. The leading role played by Milner Group members and collaborators in the formation, organisation and management of the League is beyond dispute. Lord Haldane, Lord Robert Cecil, Sir Edward Grey and General Smuts campaigned for public and government support for the League. Sir Maurice Hankey was involved in the imperial conferences leading to the creation of the League, as well as in its organisation in Paris. Cecil, Smuts, Lord Phillimore and Alfred Zimmern were involved in drafting the League Covenant. Cecil and Smuts were leaders of the British delegation at the Peace Conference. Lord Balfour, who had been working closely with Lord Rothschild and the Fabians, was on the League Council. Cecil and Lord Astor were among delegates to the League Assembly. Among those holding high positions in the influential League Secretariat were Milner collaborator Sir Erie Drummond, who became Secretary General after Hankey had declined the offer, and Milnerites Harold Butler, Arthur Salter, and Benedict Sumner. While the British Milner Group clearly dominated the League, it is interesting to note who they shared power with. As France was the main permanent League member after Britain, the post of President of the League Assembly was given to former Prime Minister Léon Bourgeois, a liberal socialist, early advocate of a League of Nations, and well-known Freemason, while the Under-Secretary General was French left-winger Jean Monnet. The involvement of Freemasons like Bourgeois is significant, given that Freemasonry was largely a liberal movement with socialist leanings and therefore politically close to the Milner Group and the Fabian Society. Masonic influence on politics was exercised across Europe through internationalist intriguers like Joseph Rettinger and Count Coudenhove-Kalergi. In America, through presidents from Washington to Theodore and F.D. Roosevelt, and in Britain, the home of Freemasonry, through Clement Attlee and Winston Churchill. So again, it becomes clear that the League was in effect an international liberal socialist conspiracy, which is why the scheme was backed by the leftist Wilson-House duo, but wisely turned down by the Senate, and why America never joined the League. Needless to say, the same group was also inextricably associated with Chatham House. Curtis and Cecil were Chatham House co-founders, while the others served as councillors, members and collaborators. There can be little doubt that Chatham House's official name, Institute of International Affairs, was inspired by the Council for the Study of International Relations, set up in 1914 to launch the League of Nations campaign. The latter's objective international organization, i.e. world government, was also the objective of Chatham House. Between 1927 and 1936, Chatham House branches were established in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India, and Newfoundland. Institute branches outside the English-speaking world were established between 1935 and 1917 in France, Sweden, the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, Pakistan, China, Germany, Russia, Japan, Norway, Italy, and many other countries. That is a lot of institutes with thousands of members, quote, studying international questions. Clearly, they must serve some other purpose, and that can only be the promotion of world government by a private clique. Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. This links to my sort of ideas and observations earlier of this standardization of everything everywhere, right? So it's kind of like you send out, you establish these institutes in each country, all the ones we just listed there, and then from within they permeate and penetrate and push policy to where they can and to the people they can through the spheres of influence that they have. And so this is how the trick is done, isn't it? This is the Fabian Society strategy through the mechanism, the vehicle of a think tank, of an institution, of a private group who are just getting together because they're philanthropic and they care so much about humanity. Why can't we all just get along? Maybe if we all sit around and plan the policy and scheme and come up with ways to control and guide and steer and nudge the populations, we can just enforce peace on everybody, whether they want it or not. But that list of places tallies very nicely with the list that we read on the Chatham House website at the start of the show, which admits that they had an influence in all these other countries, which copied their methodology and copied their, what do I want to call it? Structures, right? So, pretty interesting stuff. All right, we're in the final leg now. Last 3.5 pages. Chatham House and the United Nations. The United Nations was a continuation of the Milnerite policy of world domination and a logical progression from the League. Indeed, once we have established the identity, aims, and mode of operation of the money interests behind the League, their behavior becomes entirely predictable. In the same way as World War I was used to establish the League of Nations, World War II was used to establish its successor organization, the United Nations. Both organizations were the product of the established Milner-Fabian tactic of using crises as a cover for advancing a hidden agenda. Using their influence and resources, the Milner Group and its associates were able to set up Chatham House as a body of experts advising government. Yeah, there you go. That's the experts, the rule by experts, the managerial elite, the class of people who are going to run your life, tell you what to do because they are brainy and you're a moron, basically. On the outbreak of World War II in 1939, the Institute became official advisor to the Foreign Office. Council Chairman Lord Astor set up a special organization known as the Foreign Research and Press Service, and that was also admitted on the Chatham House website, so that's confirmed, which was tasked with answering all questions related to international affairs for government departments. Lord Astor's permanent representative in the FRPS was Milnerite Eminence Grise Lionel Curtis, who was assisted by a committee which included Charles Kingsley Webster and Alfred Zimmern. In 1942, FRPS was merged with the Political Intelligence Department to form the new Research Department of the Foreign Office. This is how Chatham House and the money interests behind it became an integral part of the British government. Unsurprisingly, elements connected with Chatham House played key roles in the formation of the UN. Charles Webster became head of the American section of FRPS, in addition to being the head of the British Library of Information in New York. In this position, he was instrumental in getting American public opinion to embrace the idea of US participation in a new world order, and was involved in the Dumbarton Oaks and San Francisco conferences which created the United Nations organization. Other Chatham House key players were Iverson Macadam, Arnold J. Toynbee, Frederick White, and in particular Geoffrey Crowther, Lord Lothian, the ambassador to the US, and Lionel Curtis, who were on the main Chatham House Council. Leading Milnerite General Smuts wrote the preamble to the UN Charter. Being part of a wider Anglo-American connection, Chatham House did not operate independently, but in collaboration with various interlocking organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, which was infiltrating the American government and dominating its foreign policy in the same way as Chatham House was doing it in Britain. Like their Chatham House counterparts, CFR elements played leading roles in the formation of the UN. This was done through the CFR-controlled War and Peace Studies program, the Advisory Committee on Post-War Foreign Policy, and the Informal Agenda Group, which provided information and advice to the US President and State Department. Members of the above groups, who were CFR members, set the agenda and drafted documents for the Dumbarton Oaks Conference and formed the US delegation to the San Francisco Conference of 1945. Needless to say, in addition to the CFR, the Milner Group used associated organizations such as the Pilgrim Society and the Fabians to achieve its internationalist objectives. And so we got a few quotes come in while I was reading there. Ordinary person on Rumble has dumped a link to Disco Accident Drink Beer official clip. I don't think I'm going to click that link, but thanks for sharing it. For anyone else out there who does want to watch a video about drunken disco accidents. It's not really on topic, ordinary person, but thank you anyway. Let's see what we got over on YouTube. Frank Lennon, Kalergi, boom. Good God, the hubris of these people is stunning. The League to Enforce Peace. What a splendid job the UN has done in that regard, eh? Exactly, yeah. You shall know them by their fruits of their works. Is it something about fruit and trees? And I don't know. I don't know about the biblical references very well. Celine Lyon says, prevention of war. Oh, the irony. Frank says that this chapter ties so much together. And also asks, wasn't Lord Astor lost on the Titanic? I'm not sure about that one, Frank. Maybe he was. The legend goes that a bunch of people who were against the Federal Reserve also went down on the Titanic, right? And then I also heard another thing that said that it was a big insurance job and the Titanic actually never sank because they switched the name with another boat that was big and made by the same company. I'm not sure though. I haven't looked into that in too much depth. But let's continue. We're on the home stretch now. Yeah, it is a good chapter. And it's actually helping tie together the link between the Milner group and the Fabian group. It really is important to look at the outcomes and what was done. It's good to look at the words, what was admitted, what they wrote in their books. You know, the books that I showed on the previous stream about world government. Lionel Curtis's book, Civitas Dei. You've got Leonard Wolf's book, International Government. It's all well and good seeing their words and the things they write, but then what was actually done? And I think World War I leading to the League of Nations, that fell apart and didn't work. World War II comes along, leads to the UN. That stuck. And as we learned in a previous stream, it's nearly universal membership of the UN at this point. They've got pretty much all countries signed up and signed on. So it's getting there, you know. But let's learn about Chatham House and the European Union. Like the UN, the EU has Anglo-American establishment written all over it. As in the case of the UN, elements closely connected with Chatham House and its sister organization, the CFR, played key roles in the creation of the EU. One of the earliest advocates of a united Europe was Arthur Salter, who was acting chairman of the Chatham House Council in the early 1930s. When he published The United States of Europe, it should be noted that this united Europe was part of the wider Milner-Fabian agenda of world government. This is evident not only from Salter's writings, but also from outfits like Federal Union, launched by Lionel Curtis and Lord Lothian in 1938 for the purpose of establishing a federation of Britain, Europe, and America. It is for this very reason that the European Union was an Anglo-American project, instigated and backed by Anglo-American financial interests. These interests had close links to Chatham House and included David Astor, who financed the Independent League for European Cooperation, and the European League for Economic Cooperation, which became the driving force behind the European movement. Chatham House corporate member Lazard Brothers, CFR co-founder John Foster Dulles, and CFR member Averell Harriman, and John J. McCloy of the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations, all were friends and financial backers of Arthur Salter, collaborator and European Coal and Steel Community founder Jean Monnet. Chatham House and immigration. The colonial policies of the Milner Group and its global network of front organizations led by Chatham House resulted in rising numbers of immigrants arriving in Britain from Commonwealth countries. As a result, Chatham House felt it necessary to set up a race relations unit, which was launched in 1952 by prominent Milner Group member and Chatham House councillor Henry Hodson. In 1958, this became the Institute of Race Relations, under the chairmanship of Secretary of the Eugenics Society and LSE Director Alexander Carr Saunders. In 1962, the IRR was involved in the creation of the Commonwealth Immigrants Advisory Council, with the aim of advising the Home Secretary on Commonwealth immigrants. In 1965, in collaboration with the immigrant organization Campaign Against Racial Discrimination, the IRR set up the National Committee for Commonwealth Immigrants, which ostensibly aimed to promote goodwill and facilitate the integration of Commonwealth immigrants. By setting themselves up as government advisors, IRR and associated organizations have monopolized race and immigration policy. Although the IRR was precluded by its articles from expressing an opinion on race relations, a typical clever device used to feign impartiality, it is clear from its publications and activities that its main concern was to change the power relation between the immigrant and indigenous populations to the advantage of the former. This was entirely in line with the established Milner-Fabian idea of reversing white domination in favor of non-white populations throughout the Commonwealth, and increasingly in Britain, America, and other white-majority countries. As shown in the following chapters, immigration has been the material cause of other major societal ills such as multiculturalism and Islamization. Chatham House councillors, notably Dennis Healy, were also behind initiatives significantly increasing Islamic influence and power by facilitating investments and loans from oil-rich Islamic regimes to Western European countries. And that's the end of the chapter. ESP, here you are, over on Odyssey. Hope you're doing all right. Yes, you will have to catch up. You will. There was quite a good... Well, I mean, I thought it was quite a nice preamble ramble because I found a good few links there. But Melissa has to run and says thank you. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate you showing up and checking it out. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. 10 to 4. Oh, it's nearly bedtime for me, but you got a whole evening ahead of you. So hope you get everything done that you need to get done. Heidi's here on Rumble. No problem. You can catch up on the replay. She's saying, sorry I missed this one. That's all right. I forgive you. Frank Lennon says, just checked. Astor did go down with the Titanic. His body was found floating in the vicinity of the sinking days later. That is very convenient, isn't it? And interesting. That's almost like finding a passport. A passport that survived a collision between a plane and a building, if you can believe that. All right, let's have a look at the references and the footnotes. Well, no, not footnotes, really, just references. And then we'll get out of here. So that's some French book, which I can't really read. Cristian Birebent. Not sure what that's about. And then on this page, we have got a Daily Mail article with the title, Does a shadowy clique of VIPs, politicians, and billionaires run the world? ? That's from 2013. I bet in the end the answer is no, from their point of view. We got the Margaret Cole book again. This one sounds interesting. Facts and Chronicles Denied to the Public by Pierre de Villemarest. Neil Ferguson's book, again, on the Rothschilds. Davis Forrest, The Atlantic System, The Story of Anglo-American Control of the Seas. Let's see if I got a pen here that will do better for pointing. That sounds all right. Then there's A.J. Grant, An Introduction to the Study of International Relations, 1916. So these ideas do go back quite a ways. And it's interesting that we've kind of had every crisis that we needed in the intervening period to get these plans accelerated and pushed through, right? The most recent one being the big sea event. I would really like to know if Ioan Ratiu is out there. Would he write, do an updated version of this book with the events of 2012, because this was 2012 publication, from 2012 up to the present day, included and folded in and added in, because you see, like, we just made that link there where Chatham House was giving an award out to Melinda Gates, and of course the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were running the Event 201 pandemic simulation a couple of months before the Big C event was announced and started up in earnest, right? So there's links and connections between these movers and shakers all over the place, but I would really like to see Ratiu kind of updating the book and filling in that bit of timeline. That would be really cool. So, but yeah, these ideas, 1916, this book was about international relations, was published. So what else have we got? Chatham House, a brief account of the origins, purposes, and methods of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, London, 1937. That's probably a good one to get hold of. Stephen King Hall. Here's a book on the secret world of Freemasons from 1984. And there's an article, Leonard Woolf as an Architect of the League of Nations, 2007. Remember, Leonard Woolf wrote the book International Government. Then the Martin Rose book, Fabian Freeway. Jean Monnet's book, Memoirs. We've got Eustace Mullins, The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, The London Connection. Here's one, 2004. Inderjeet Parmar, Think Tanks and Power in Foreign Policy. That'd be a good one. Then we got The Pilgrims of Great Britain by Anne Pimlet Baker. Then, of course, Carol Quigley, Patricia Pugh. We talked about those books on the stream before, on the previous streams. There's the Helen Rappaport book, Conspirator Lenin in Exile. We got the David Rockefeller memoirs, Arthur Salter, Memoirs of a Public Servant, the Rothschild Archive there, citing the Japanese War. Dan Smoot, Invisible Government, that's one I got to get. Walter Lippmann and the American Sanctuary, Ronald Steele. Then Sutton, Anthony C. Sutton with Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. Then there's Henry Winkler, The League of Nations Movement in Great Britain, 1914 to 1919. That's a 1952 publication. Probably another good one to get. I've heard generally speaking that any books sort of before the 50s tend to be pretty good to get hold of, because before the 50s, they were really publishing books for distribution among the elite. And then it was only really from the 50s onwards where books were published for mass consumption and used as a tool to shape mass consciousness and mass perception and mass worldview, right? Or in other words, to feed to the cattle. Whereas before that, it was books that they would write and pass around each other. Like this is how, passing around a copy of like Machiavelli's book, The Prince, or international government. This is how we're going to roll out our system all over the world. So pre-1950s books tend to be better to get hold of. I've been told that. I don't know if it's true, but I do like pounce on older books these days. My book buying patterns have definitely changed and matured over the last sort of 4 or 5 years since I've been building up my library. Now, if I see something that's that old, I'll seriously consider grabbing it, just because it's the historical value of it is very good. So what else have we got in the notes? Just more connections with the financial institutions and the Anglo-American establishment. I'll put that on the screen. You can grab a screen grab, or you can pause it and read through, starting there. Talking about lobbying groups, Rockefeller and Rothschild groups, connections with the Anglo-American establishment, Lazard, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs. So Goldman Sachs, interesting. Remember, we were just reading about Mark Carney. First began his career with 13 or 16 years at Goldman Sachs, then became the head of the Bank of Canada, then head of the Bank of England. Now he's the president of the Chatham House, as well as World Economic Forum, Lackey, as well as. He's doing a lot of stuff, isn't he? So there you are. That brings it full circle. Nice to have Goldman Sachs here on the last page. And don't forget as well that Lord Milner and Mark Carney both have freedom of the City of London. They are not the subject of feudal lords like the rest of us. They have been exonerated of that and are now free to do what they will in the world of high finance and highfalutin world takeovers. So there you are. That is the end of tonight's broadcast, pretty much. R. Murray 1 just popped into the chat or on Rumble. Hayes, what do you think of Fritz Springmeier? Worth reading. I haven't read his books, but I have a good pal of mine in my Telegram chat, and he's a bigger book nerd than I am, and he tends to think of. He's talked to me about Fritz Springmeier before, and he tends to think of Fritz Springmeier as one of those, perhaps, what's the best? Like let's say a limited hangout. Like I would read it, but I would read it with a critical. No, I don't believe every single word of it. Like find other resources to verify what's in there, because I don't think it's. From what I've heard, I haven't read it. As I say, this is secondhand information, anecdotal, but I've heard that it's not as academically rigorous as you might want it to be. It's got a bit of. What's the word that I'm looking for here? It's late. I've been talking for too long. I can't remember my words. It's a bit dramatic. Maybe it's a bit of conspiratainment put out there to, it's the Illuminati and it's the bloodlines and it's like, okay, oh, well and good, but I don't know if it's like academically rigorous history that you can hang your hat on in the same way as like Quigley and this one that we're reading tonight. but I would say still read it, but read many sources around the same topic and just find, what sticks and what slips. That would be my advice on that one. Cyril's Way over on YouTube. Good evening and thanks, Nick. My dog Cyril just chills to your readings better than any audiobook we listen. Thanks a million. Oh, that's awesome. I'm very glad you and your dog are enjoying the readings, and that's really good to hear. I'm a massive fan of dogs as a species, and I'm really happy to hear that Cyril's chilling out to the reading. That's good news. Frank Lennon says, great one, Nick. Thanks a mil. You are very welcome. Thank you very much for being in the chat and contributing, sharing the links and helping me with my learning journey. You're always adding value and giving me lots of useful stuff to think about. So I think we might just wrap it up there. Bang on 3 hours pretty much, or just over. So what should we say as a final thing? Do not forget that you can go to allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews, where you can check out all my links. Surprise, surprise. All my links just takes you to where all my links are. Find the places to watch, find the places to follow and subscribe and support and share and like and comment and do all that good stuff. You can send a one-off or a monthly donation if you like. Crypto, also good. And you can just shoot me an email if you want to ask a question or, get in touch, send me a book recommendation. I can do something about this. I can get it to oh no, I can't do it on this one. Sometimes you can get them to wobble a little bit. They kind of shake and stand out. But yeah, you can shoot me an email. You can listen to my music on SoundCloud, and you can join the free community. I've called it a free community for tech skeptics. So it's just, if you're a bit skeptical about where all this tech is taking us and what the screens are doing to the minds of our young people and their relationships. I've just finished reading a book. Where is it? So many books on my desk. I can't bloody find them. I just finished reading this one, which is Trapped in the Web, about this guy who liberated himself from internet addiction and how you can do it too. And there was a bit in here, a very good quote where he just says, books are medicine for the mind, which I think is one of my favorite quotes. I'm probably not going to be able to find it now. I can't remember which page it was on or whereabouts in the book it was. But he was talking about how much more beneficial it is to read books and read from paper rather than screens. There's a whole host of benefits that come with actually reading from paper and getting off the screens that people overlook and don't take advantage of. And so that was just one of the nuggets of wisdom and insight that I took away from this book that I thought was pretty good. Yeah, I'm struggling to find the actual page now. But Trapped in the Web, that's the beginnings of my research. And I'm going to share the findings and the review of that within my within the free community, within the school Devised. That's the name of it. I can't remember the name of my own community there. I'll click on it so you can have a look at it. Yeah, so that's what we're doing over there. We're talking about tech, screen addiction. We're talking about how to get out of it, how to change your life, and maybe you have got an idea about what I would recommend to replace your screen addiction. Hint, hint, read some books. I think it's a much better way to spend your time and your mind and you know, keep your mind occupied, because we all got to keep our mind occupied, and we've all got appetite for new information. And I think books are a much better place to get that rather than the endless streaming and scrolling and torrent of disorganized information that we get on a daily basis through our social media and whatnot. So I will leave it there. Great to see you all. Thanks for hanging out. We're going to be back on Friday night, and Friday night stream is going to be the last one before Christmas, but I will do another one before the end of the year. But Friday night stream will be here 7 p.m. UK time, and we're going to be reading. Oh, let me just quickly show you this because it's quite a good chapter title. I'll bring the book cam back so I can show you this. We're going to be reading The UN Scam. Ooh. So be sure to come back for that. The UN Scam. That's going to be saucy and spicy, no doubt. So thanks for hanging out. I hope the rest of your evening is good. It's Tuesday night, isn't it? So I hope you're having a good week, getting into the festive holiday spirit. Don't forget to get outside during the daylight hours. We don't get a lot of daylight hours at the minute here in the UK, so maximize it and make the most of it when you can. Get out, go for some walks, and try and soak up what little sunlight there is to be gained. The days will start getting longer again pretty soon. We're nearly over the hump. But as we come up to Christmas, it's a good time to be thinking about family and loved ones and those small things that we often overlook in life that we need to be grateful for. So that would be my parting message for tonight. Take care of yourselves and each other. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, God bless.